Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss this Friday evening. Thank you for your company. Want to make sure we get your voice on the air about all these issues. Firstly, the hundreds of asylum seekers living in taxpayer-funded hotels that have been charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and gross bodily harm. There's also been protests, of course, protesters clashing with police outside an Essex migrant hotel. We'll talk all about that. We'll talk about UK Special Forces, MI6 spies and military officers named in the Afghan data leak. The problems for the government just keep coming with this, injunctions lifted and more information coming out. Also, the price of the Israel-Hamas war protests costing UK police at least £27 million in the last year alone. And surprise, surprise, police are taking no further action after an investigation into Kneecap's Glastonbury show. That is two-tier justice in action right here in the UK in 2025. The BBC as well is to roll out anti-Semitism awareness training. Just a minor issue. If you need anti-Semitism awareness training, it's probably not a great advertisement for your organisation. We'll be talking to Nigel Evans a little bit later on, the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, and playing out a fascinating interview I did yesterday with Aviva Siegel and her husband Keith. Keith was a hostage. Hamas took him and kept him as a hostage for 484 days. Aviva herself was held for 51 days. Absolutely horrendous conditions, and they're campaigning for the 50 hostages held in Gaza in that horrendous war, in that horrendous situation. They want everybody, all those hostages, to be released and for the war to end. There's lots to talk about in American politics as well. Trump denying he wrote a lewd birthday note for Jeffrey Epstein. Lots to discuss in all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number I want you to call to get your voice on the air to let me know what you think today. 0344 499 1000. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp text message or a voice note, less than a minute please, or of course you can ring me on the number. You can also text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. You can follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads of discussion points today. I want to get your voice on the air. Make sure you have your say. Lots to come between now and 7 here on Talk. Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch already. Many people pointing out that Bob Villan still haven't been arrested. That is true. Even in Somerset, police saying they're going to take no further action against NICAP for what they said, and actually Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, has reacted to this already. He has said this is another example of two-tier justice. One of the band said on stage, "Let's start a riot in court," referring to an upcoming court appearance on a different matter. This is clearly inciting violence, yet he has been let off scot-free. Lucy Connolly, meanwhile, Chris Philp says, the Shadow Home Secretary, Lucy Connolly was convicted in jail for nearly 3 years for a similar incident after Keir Starmer strongly encouraged action in connection with last summer's riots. This appears to be two-tier justice in action in Keir Starmer's Britain. Everyone should be treated the same before the law, but two-tier Keir does not seem to agree. Well, this was a decision, of course, by even on Somerset Police, not Keir Starmer himself, but it's very, very interesting nonetheless, and it comes as The Sun is reporting that hundreds of asylum seekers living in taxpayer-funded hotels have appeared in court charged with criminal offences including rape, robbery and GBH. We want to play a clip now of a protester outside an asylum hotel in Epping. This was separate protests, explaining why they were peacefully protesting in Essex. This was in the last 24 hours.
Just want to thank everyone for coming here today. We're all local people. We're all good, local, tax-paying people. We don't want trouble. We don't want fights. My question would be, why, and all due respect to the police, why are you allowing agitators to come and fight against us? Because you are inciting violence. We're not. You are. Mr. Starmer, I hope you're going to hear, I hope you hear this. Why are you letting 500-600 undocumented men come across the channel every day into this country? We don't know who they are, we don't know what their background is, but they don't share our values, they don't respect women, and they do not respect children. Yes! Yes!
Well, that was during a peaceful protest in Essex yesterday. There were, of course, arrests later on when things did turn non-peaceful, as the police would say it. Hundreds of asylum seekers living in taxpayer-funded hotels like the one that woman was talking about a minute ago have appeared in court charged with criminal offences including rape, robbery and GBH. 1 in every 100 migrants housed in these hotels has been hauled before magistrates this year, 339 cases. The Sun monitored courts across the country for the first 6 months and noted defendants who gave their address as one of the 105 known asylum hotels. Now, there are 210, twice the number that are asylum hotels. What we know is that there are 32,000 asylum seekers in those hotels. The true number of crimes could be even higher because the full list of the UK hotels hasn't been published. Of the court cases monitored by The Sun, 29 related to sexual crimes, 7 alleged rapes, 1 proven incident of exposure and 1 of attempting to engage in sexual communication with a child. A further 64 violent related offences were recorded, including common assault, GBH, ABH, possessing a knife and possessing an imitation firearm. What is absolutely clear is that at least 1% of these migrants in hotels are up to no good, are up to things that have led them to being arrested and charged. This is very, very serious. Let's talk to Tom Jones, who is from the Centre for Migration Control and author of the Potemkin Village Idiot Substack. Tom, what do you make of this?
Well, frankly, Peter, it's hard to know really what to say. I think fundamentally you can sum it up with the phrase that mass migration is a war on women. These are absolutely staggering crime rates, particularly given the fact that the rates of migration are not showing any signs of slowing down. And I think this research really only focuses on those housed in Home Office hotels. I think you also have to take into account that up to a third of sexual assaults last year were committed by migrants. Foreign nationals are responsible for nearly a quarter of all sex crimes convictions in Britain. There are 87 nationalities with a higher conviction rate for sexual offences than the native British population. And last year, those 87 nationalities were given over 500,000 long-term visas by the Home Office.
Yeah, I should correct myself and say that GBH is, of course, grievous bodily harm. These are shocking statistics, and the likelihood of people from other countries being involved in this kind of crime is very high, as you say. I just wonder whether there is any sense of the government having any grip on this and the police having any grip on this. I mean, the fact that they're being brought to court, for example, is that actually a positive sign?
Well, obviously, it's a positive sign that these people are being brought to justice. But frankly, the systemic court backlog, the asylum backlog, and the sheer number of crimes that we're dealing with here suggest that really the government doesn't have control, doesn't have grip of what's going on. And in fairness to Labour, I think this has been the case for a long time. We now have one of the highest rates in the developed world. That has not happened since Labour have come into power. That has been a very, very long-term trend, and it should be basically a plague on the houses of all our politicians that we have created a country that is no longer particularly safe for women. In fact, markedly less safe than other comparable countries like France.
Yeah, and we've got some reaction already, including from Linda in Worcester. He says the headline of 1 in 100 illegal immigrants appearing in court, these are the ones that have been identified and caught. The 100 are merely the tip of the proverbial iceberg. And Sally says the number of crimes by migrants are only those being charged. The actual number must be massive. And this is absolutely correct, and would be the case in regard to the rest of the population as well, in that these are only the ones that are actually being charged and coming to court, Tom. So the true number could be a lot higher.
Yeah, the true number is probably absolutely staggering. And I think if I used that statistic earlier that foreign nationals are responsible for nearly a quarter of all sex crime convictions in Britain. The rape conviction rate is really, really tiny. So the actual figures are, going to be absolutely staggering. And I think, you showed a clip of that woman at the protest earlier. I think people are waking up. They are noticing patterns because of the scale of migration. These hotels are now being dotted right around the country. Formerly, they were more heavily in kind of London and the southeast, or in deprived areas where the hotels were a lot cheaper. They're now popping up kind of all over the place. And I think people are really starting to notice patterns of behaviour and are really taking to the streets.
Yeah, and it doesn't take this investigation to show people what level of a problem there is. For example, one hotel in Barbican in central London, the Thistle City Hotel, which has been highlighted as a hub for people working illegally as food delivery drivers, has had 32 men up in court for offences including assault of an emergency worker and theft from a shop. I mean, people can see this on the ground. This is good journalism, and this is actually exposing what is going on. At the same time, people in their own communities know what's going on, and that's why people were peacefully protesting in Epping yesterday, the vast majority of them. And if you peacefully protest, I have absolutely no issue with you, especially when you're peacefully protesting against something which I agree with, which is that this is seriously a problem. The problem for me comes when it spills over into violence or attacking the police, which nobody should ever do. But people have had enough of this, Tom, and this protest that we saw in Essex yesterday, I think that is just, speaking of the tip of the iceberg, I think that is just the start of many of these protests, and I think it's going to be a long, hot summer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the country feels really febrile at the minute, and I think one of the scariest things is that this very closely mirrors the riots that we saw in Ballymena and in Southport. And I think one of the scary things is it's really difficult to know where these riots, where the next riot is going to pop up from. But the truth is, it could be anywhere with one of these Home Office hotels, anywhere. Given the huge rate of sexual impropriety that the current wave of migration is bringing, it could be almost anywhere in the country. It could be somewhere familiar to us, where we've got friends, where we've got family. It could be somewhere, frankly, that a lot of us have never heard of. I mean, I had never heard of Ballymena, if I'm being honest, until the riot broke out. And I think living in a country where you are expecting riots, but you don't know where they're coming from, I think is a very, very, very uncomfortable place for us all to be in.
It certainly is. I mean, at what stage can the government do something? Because we've heard all of this about the fact that they're going to smash the gangs, that they're going to do this one in, one out policy. The one in, one out policy in particular, I spoke about it on my shows for 4 consecutive days last week. I don't think there was a single person I spoke to. And if there is someone out there who wants to tell me, even by text or a phone call or whatever, that they're convinced that one in, one out will actually help solve this problem, please let me know. I'm not convinced by it. Tom, what do you think?
No, the one in, one out scheme is not going to work, but it's symptomatic of Starmer and Labour's problem on illegal migration and on migration more widely, because they are a left-wing party with a very, very left-wing base, who are, trying to pick up votes from Reform. They're trapped in a very, very difficult place, which is basically that they want they cannot be tough on the causal factors, the pull factors of migration. So that's looking at things like changing the benefit system, but they have to be tough on.
Hello, Tom?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I thought I lost you.
No, we've still got you. You have to be tough on.
Fantastic. But no, they have to be, they cannot be tough on the pull factors. So that's looking at things like benefits for the individual migrants. They can't criminalise the individual migrants because their left-wing base won't like it. But they have to be tough on immigration in order to appeal to the voters who are going to get them over the line at the next election, which will hopefully be Reform voters. So they are trapped basically in offering up technocratic fixes that simply don't work. And that's what the one in, one out scheme is. Basically, it is a pre-failed scheme that is only designed to catch a headline because it sounds like Nigel Farage's net zero migration plan.
Thank you, Tom. That's Tom Jones there, who is from the Centre for Migration Control. He's also the author of the Potemkin Village Idiot Substack. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Lorraine, who says, we now live in a country where a white British child cannot go to school to celebrate British culture, and the school in question has to close early because of extremists who have threatened the safety of those who attend. A teacher is still in hiding after being threatened with death, while no action was taken against the perpetrators, and Jews live in constant fear. Now we find that Kneecap, who advocated on video for all to see that the only Tory was a dead Tory and kill your local MP, walked freely around what was once our beautiful land. The real disgrace is two-tier justice and its sinister implications. You're absolutely right, Lorraine. I agree with every single word of what you've just heard there and what you've texted to me. So thank you for that. And it is disgraceful. Kneecap are an outrageous band. They want publicity, they court publicity, they say outrageous things such as kill your local MP, the only good Tory is a dead Tory, and indeed inciting a riot. But even in Somerset Police will do nothing. Here's my prediction: they'll do nothing about Pascal Robinson Foster of Bob Villan. As clear as day, broadcast on the BBC, he said, death, death to the IDF. He was inciting the murder of hundreds of thousands of people. That is what he did, and I am basically convinced, because of what's happened with Kneecap today, that there will be very, very little done about it. I'd be surprised if he's arrested. I'd be surprised if he's charged. And again, that is two-tier justice in our country. It is disgraceful. It needs to end. It needs to be equal. We should all be equal before the law, no matter what our background, no matter what we say. If it is inciting violence, as Pascal Robinson Foster, and my belief, did, he should be arrested and charged. David has been in touch on the protest with a voice note.
These protests in Epping, Starmer is playing the full weight of the law card again, but whoever gets arrested this time won't be tricked like they were before. These trials will end up jury trials. Given the circumstances surrounding the Epping protests and the wider aspect of what is going on, I'll be shocked if anyone gets convicted.
Very, very interesting, David, there. As I say, I have absolutely no problem with those people in Epping having peaceful protests, making their views clear in a peaceful way. When it goes over into violence, that's where I draw the line, and I'm not happy about that. It is very interesting to see what the actual protests will, any violence there, any arrests will actually lead to. We'll keep a very, very close eye on that here at Talk. We'll also talk in just a second about UK Special Forces, MI6 spies and military officers named in the Afghan data leak. There's just more and more coming on this. An absolute nightmare for the government, especially the Labour government, reacting to what was done under the Conservatives. I have a slightly different view to many of my fellow presenters in this. I think Ben Wallace, who was then the Defence Secretary, was right to injunct it. I think if there was going to be a real problem, and if there were going to be people whose lives were in danger, I think he was right to put that injunction there. Should it have lasted 2 years? Of course it shouldn't. A few months would have been enough to clean up the mess. But more and more of the mess is coming out. We're going to talk about that with Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, in just a second here on Talk. Stay with us.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of reaction to what we're talking about, including from Sally. He says these migrant sexual crime numbers are only those actually being charged. I keep wondering whether women and girls could bring a prosecution against the government, given the way they've been mistreated over the past years. Men in their spaces, sports, etc., Pakistani rape gangs, and now threats from males from alien cultures preventing them from living their lives in freedom and without fear of attack, murder and rape. All the fault and responsibility of our government. Angela's been in touch and says, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a cover-up regarding sex crimes against women, children and gay men by illegal migrants. It's time to remove these men from migrant hotels and put them in detention centres in short order. Suzanne says, Bournemouth, near where I live, rape and violent crime statistics are by far the worst in the area. We've had rapes of young girls in the sea, women dragged into toilets, migrants following women around who have to work in the areas of the hotels. Many fights break out. And Amy, on the anti-Semitism aspect, says, what makes the BBC think that staff are going to take the anti-Semitism training seriously, especially when you have the head of news at the BBC saying that the political and military wings of Hamas are different, and also the streaming of Bob Vylan at Glastonbury. Amy, you're right. This was an absolutely astonishing broadcast by Deborah Turness, who is the sort of overall head of BBC News, who made it very clear that said, it should be very clear that Hamas's military wing and political wings are different things. Well, yes, they are, but they're both prescribed terrorist organisations here in the UK, so it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. Let's just see what she had to say. This is Deborah Turness, who is the head of BBC News.
I think it's really important that we are clear that Abdullah's father was a Deputy Agriculture Minister and therefore, was a member of the Hamas-run government, which is different to being part of the military wing of Hamas. And I think externally, it's often simplified that he was in Hamas, and I think it's an important point of detail that we need to continually remind people of the difference and of that connection.
What a load of nonsense. I mean, yes, they are different in that one is military and one is political, but they're all the same organisation. They're all Hamas, and they're all people who want to destroy Israel, kill people, make life a misery for Jews, and indeed for the people in the Palestinian territories who they don't want to get food from organisations that want to give it to them, for example. I mean, what a load of nonsense, a self-justifying claptrap from the BBC. It really drives me up the wall. Let's hear from Stephen in East Yorkshire on migration. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, good afternoon. It's just about this. Present government seems to think that the ECHR legislation gives migrants some sort of priority over the citizens of this country. I mean, where we live in our part of the world, there's been multiple occasions of lads sort of like trying to coerce young girls into cars. I mean, this was what basically I think was a precursor to the riots in Hull last year. Now, I'm not condoning what happened, but from what I'm led to believe, all that happened was there was two cars with a number of migrants from the hotels in Hull were just given a caution.
Yeah.
Well, it's hardly a deterrent.
And this is happening all the time, Stephen. This is happening an awful lot. And there are loads of people women who don't feel
Absolutely.
safe, parents who don't feel safe that their children walking home from school or even being in school, because there are sometimes people waiting outside schools who are doing this as well. It is just absolutely dreadful, Stephen.
The other point was going to be, if they are going to apply this legislation so much to say they've got a quality of life, why can't we apply the...
Well, exactly. Why can't we have it?
Women should be able to take them to court for this then. If you've been sexually harassed on an ongoing basis by... I mean, we were somewhere not too long ago, me and a few colleagues from work, and there were 60 of them loitering outside this hotel where they were all based.
Yeah.
And I says, well, you know, I remember many, many years ago, I'm older to remember, you could be charged for riotous assembly.
Yeah. Well, listen, if people are just hanging around on the street, there's nothing wrong with that, Stephen, necessarily, even if people do feel intimidated. It's when they do intimidate people, when they say things, when they act in ways that are completely contrary to our culture. And I think a lot of people are very, very worried about what's happening at the moment, including you, by the sound of things, Stephen.
Well, my colleague was in near one of the hotels. I won't mention whereabouts it was exactly. And there were a number of chaps coming up to him saying, here, have this particular book of a certain religious persuasion. You know, and he said, no, I don't want one. You know, and they were quite in his face about it.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't sort of like saying, have you ever thought about this? You know, no, it was you must have this.
No, thank you. And he should have been allowed to move on. Stephen, thank you very much for your thoughts there. And just another example of what's going on in our country today. We'll talk more about that. Lots more people have been in touch about that. But I want to talk just now about what the government is dealing with at the moment in terms of UK Special Forces, MI6 spies and military officers named in this Afghan data leak. This keeps going on. And a question actually from Leslie saying Healy, the Defence Secretary, knew about the injunction well before the general election. Why didn't he cancel the injunction when he gained power? Well, it's not up to him, Leslie. It's up to the courts to decide about the injunction and the super injunction. Philip Ingram is with us now, a former senior military intelligence officer. Philip, this mess continues. I'm probably, unlike many people, think that Ben Wallace did the right thing by injuncting this in the first place, because I think a lot of people were going to die if he didn't. But where are we today on Friday, given how much of a problem this has been for the government?
Well, I agree with you completely. Ben Wallace did make the right decision to injunct this in the first place so that they could scope the potential problems that there were and come up with some form of solution. What I don't understand is how, when the government applied for an injunction, supposedly the court said, no, we'll have a super injunction instead, and the MOD lawyers then went along with that. And it will have had to have been reapplied for on numerous occasions. So again, you know, it's the MOD reapplying for a super injunction. And I think, from what I've read, the current government will have had to have applied for it as well, as they've reviewed it. And I know that the review that they carried out was done by someone who he will acquiesce to the direction that he's given rather than necessarily look at things independently, is what I have been told by someone who says they know him. I don't know them personally, but I have to question everything that's going on.
And
with more information dribbling out all the time, we haven't been given the truth by John Healy when he made his statement, and there's likely to be more that comes out.
And surely the whole point of this is, first rule of communications is, when there's a scandal, get everything out in the open, make it absolutely clear in as much as you can. Now, there will be legal reasons why certain things didn't come out this week, injunctions not lifted, but there'll be so many people in the military, taxpayers, talking about how much money this is going to cost as well, after a catastrophic and stupid leak, and the fact that there are worries about what sort of people are coming here, whether they are legally allowed to, whether they should be coming here in the first place, whether they are whether it's safe for them to come here, or whether they have criminal convictions. I mean, it's just a total mess, Philip, isn't it?
It's a complete mess, and it throws up, you know, a mess of procedures that there are inside the Ministry of Defence. You know, Director of Special Forces, that directorate where it was leaked from, is one of the most secure military headquarters that there is in the country. How were the procedures ignored in there to stop this data getting out? How does someone have access to a database with all of this detail on it that is at the most sensitive levels? Because from an intelligence officer's perspective, it's manna from heaven what's come out. You can deduce so many different things from it. And then you've got the standard Ministry of Defence cover-ups that are coming in, including you trying to cover up the individual who almost certainly accidentally leaked it, but that there needs to be some form of repercussions for getting things wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be sacked, but it means that there has to be repercussions.
Can I get your opinion on two other stories as well, Philip? One is that the Hamas the pro-Hamas war protests, some people in those marches are pro-Hamas, some of them aren't, have cost the UK police at least £27 million in the last year alone.
I'm not surprised. You're just policing them from a public order perspective is costly enough, but also everything that has to go on in the background, because a lot of these marches and the individuals that are organising these silly little do-goody groups that think that they know what they're talking about actually don't know what they're talking about, and they're being manipulated by hostile intelligence services. So there's an awful lot of effort then going in to try and identify exactly what level of influence that they've got and what their intent is and what their intent's going to be as things come out of it. And then you get the wider disruption that disrupts all of us. There's freedom of speech and there's freedom of protest, but whenever that freedom of speech and freedom of protest starts to impinge on the freedoms of the majority in the country, one has to question whether we're getting our balance right.
Philip, thank you. And we'll actually hear from two former hostages who were in Gaza in a little bit later on in the programme. I interviewed them yesterday, Keith Siegel and Aviva Siegel. Aviva has spoken to us before. She was a hostage for 51 days in the tunnels in Gaza. Her husband Keith, who I also spoke to, was taken hostage for 484 days. They are going around the world at the moment talking to anyone who listens to them, journalists, politicians and so on, talking about the 50 hostages who are still being held by Hamas terrorists, 20 of them we believe alive, and hoping to get them back. Just on that note, in regard to people who are against Israel, kneecap, no further action taken against them, despite the fact that one of their number at Glastonbury was, as far as I can see, and saw and heard, inciting a riot.
Because I refused the show, I refused to watch them whatsoever. They're still under investigation. One member's still under investigation for comments he made.
Yeah, he's been charged. So yeah, we'll be careful about that. But these could have, in theory, been further arrests and charges.
They could have been. I have to question anyone with any morals who supports this organisation named after one of the most heinous ways of maiming someone. Whenever you've heard the blood-curdling scream of someone who's been kneecapped, you can never forget it. And it's not a joke. It's not something you put a name out in protest. They are being manipulated by those that came from before the Good Friday Agreement, the same ones that are manipulating those that are protesting around Gaza and the Palestinian cause and everything else. And they've been manipulated to act as a mouthpiece because they've got an audience. And that is manipulating lots of young people. Some of those young people are ones that Keir Starmer wants to give the vote to now. I'm really, really concerned about this.
Yeah. I am too. Philip, thank you. That's Philip Ingram there, former senior military intelligence officer, and one of the group's members, one of NECAP's members, Liam Ohana, appeared in court in June, charged with a terror offence, and he will be back in court in August. He's on continuing bail at the moment. Hamas, the terrorist organisation, have told Reuters that they're ready for a long battle with Israel. They've also said they've offered to release all hostages in Gaza as part of a deal to end the war, and say if an agreement is not reached during current ceasefire talks, the group may not agree to an interim truce in the future. Well, we'll see what happens there. There have been so many talks, so many discussions about a possible ceasefire in Gaza. As I say, we'll speak to two hostages who have been there a bit later on. I spoke to them yesterday. We'll play out that interview a little bit later on. We'll talk in a second as well about the BBC rolling out anti-Semitism awareness training after a string of scandals. Will it make any difference? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Quite a number of people getting in touch on the data leak as well. Chris says, can the Great British Military Force go into the sea and stop the boats as the government and military, or separate? Well, the government tells the military what to do, I'm afraid. Simon says it obviously wasn't the right thing to do. It should have been transparent from the beginning. The Taliban knew the names from day one. Yet another example of pushing the can down the road. Simon, I'm afraid I disagree with you on there. Jane says, I'm quite nervous. I live on my own in an extremely quiet and can be lonely cul-de-sac with lots of trees and places to hide. I can't go to the local shopping centre at night. It's too rough. Love the show, says Jane. Jane, I'm really sorry that you're feeling that way, and those are the circumstances you are dealing with. There are loads of people getting in touch saying the same thing as Stephen did a little bit earlier on. I want to talk, just to tell you that in less than an hour, actually, we're going to play a bit of an interview with Keith and Aviva Siegel. They were the hostages that Hamas took on the 7th of October. Aviva, 51 days in captivity. Keith, 484 days. They explain what life was like.
Had to beg for water and felt physically terrible for a lot of the time, weak, exhausted, in pain.
I wasn't free at all. I wasn't free, and I'm not free yet. To think about all these hostages that are still in Gaza, chained, hidden, starving. I lost hope while I was there. I was thought that I was forgotten, and Hamas is responsible.
Aviva Siegel speaking there, and you heard her husband Keith. We'll play that whole interview a little bit later on in the programme. There's a controversy at the BBC at the moment because of their very clear anti-Semitism in some of their reports, and very bizarre intonation and bizarre broadcast by the chief executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, in an all-staff call earlier this week, saying that it's important to remember that Hamas is both a political and military organisation. Well, we know that, but they're all terrorists under UK law, despite the fact that the BBC won't call them that. This is what Deborah Turness, the chief executive of BBC News, a very, very experienced person who worked in America, worked in this country for a very long time. She's it when it comes to BBC News. This is her view.
I think it's really important that we are clear that Abdullah's father was a deputy agriculture minister and therefore, was a member of the Hamas-run government, which is different to being part of the military wing of Hamas. And I think externally, it's often simplified that he was in Hamas, and I think it's an important point of detail that we need to continually remind people of the difference and of that connection.
Except there isn't a difference. Yes, some of them act politically and some of them act militarily, as they would say. They're terrorists. They're all terrorists. They're all terrorists under British law. Everyone in Hamas is a terrorist. That's it. It's really straightforward. And Abdullah, who was the boy she was referring to there in the Gaza documentary, an absolutely disgraceful piece of television where it was not made clear that he was the son of a Hamas terrorist. And in fact, the boy himself, not saying he's a terrorist for a second, but nonetheless, he was pictured with a gun and a Hamas headband beside a masked man. And of course, the brilliant research of the BBC couldn't even bring this up. There was a picture shared very, very widely earlier this week. I want to speak to Nicole Lambert, who's a journalist and who often deals with these issues. Nicole, good to talk to you again. The BBC is rolling out anti-Semitism awareness training after a string of scandals. Maybe Deborah Turness should take it.
I hope she will. I know that from friends in the BBC, they've been asking for this for not just since October 7th, but before. There was a big scandal in 2021 when some Jewish kids were attacked in Oxford Street in London, and the BBC were the only people to make up this claim that they'd been making anti-Arab slurs. Ofcom reported against the BBC, and I know that Jewish people have been asking for anti-Semitism training at the BBC as a result of this, and this idea that somehow Jews always need to deserve anti-Semitism and they don't treat it as other racisms. But my worry about this particular anti-Semitism that's been reported on is that it's not going to be talking about Israel, which seems ridiculous, because if you're going to learn about anti-Semitism in the present day, you have to understand what contemporary anti-Semitism looks like. So, for example, this morning we had someone from Gaza talking about all the dead babies. And of course, children are being killed in Gaza because that's what happens when there's a war. But this idea that Jews are deliberately trying to kill babies, you need to know that that is an ancient blood libel trope that started in this country nearly 1,000 years ago and has continued to follow Jews around the world. Jews have been murdered for this blood libel trope, and we hear it being pushed by the BBC. So in the Lords this week, it was discussed that the BBC is the biggest instigator of anti-Semitism in this country, and I believe that. I genuinely do, and I say that with great sadness because, like you, like everybody here probably watching, I grew up on the BBC, loving it, and the romantic idea that people listened to it in World War II, and it was the sound of liberty and freedom. Whereas now it's constantly pushing this idea, and friends of mine that work at the BBC say it's almost as if something bad happens in the Middle East, how can we make it Israel's fault?
Yeah. And actually, I mean, talking about anti-Semitism, there was an incredible in the sense that it has no credibility, and incredible in the sense that I was just really shocked by something that the Australian editor of The Guardian wrote, which I'm sure you've seen earlier this week. I mean, I think I probably will read this out, but it's the publication of the Special Envoy's Plan. It's the latest flex by the Jewish establishment, anti-Semitic. The in-house scribes have been busy. No institution, organisation or department is exempt from the latest push to weaponise anti-Semitism, again anti-Semitic, and insist on the exceptionalism of Australian Jewry, again anti-Semitic. One might pause to wonder what First Nations people, who are the victims of racism every day, feel about the priority given to 120,000 well-educated, secure and mostly affluent individuals. I mean, that is so anti-Semitic. It's just everywhere, Nicole.
It is. It's depressing. I have to tell you, like people, because I write about it, people send me messages every day about different worlds where it's happening in. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the NHS, the schools, the universities. Someone today said to me, have you heard about what's going on with the dentists? I know it's going on in the chef world. It's going on massively in the music world. You've mentioned kneecap and all of that.
Tell me about kneecap. Tell me about your thoughts on the fact that no further action will be taken against them for, as far as I can see, inciting a riot.
Well, they and some of their followers have put out a story saying that actually they are the ones being attacked, that it's freedom of speech, that they are simply trying to speak up for Palestine. And this is the whole thing, to go back to the discussion about Hamas, which is, if you really want to speak about a free Palestine, speak up against Hamas. But as we know, some of kneecap, they have been accused of shouting up Hamas or something like that, or up Hezbollah, and kind of pushing that terrorist agenda as your previous
We'll just be careful about that, Nicole, because there are some charges in regard to that, and we wouldn't want to prejudice the trial. But I just want to play another clip. Actually, this is what Lord Austin, Ian Austin, absolute hero, has been saying about the BBC and anti-Semitism in the House of Lords.
Sadly, as the shocking increase in anti-Semitism shows, there is obviously a place in Britain for anti-Semitism. That is what is happening, and I'm afraid one of the main causes is the BBC, because if you suggest, as it does, with its disproportionate, unbalanced and biased coverage, that Israel is committing uniquely evil crimes, that is obviously going to drive hostility towards people in the UK who identify with Israel, which is the vast majority of the Jewish community. And this is why the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport was completely right to demand changes at the top. And is it not a disgrace that only yesterday the BBC's head of current affairs, Deborah Turness, suggested there was no difference between Hamas ministers and its military wing? So I have to ask the Minister, when is the government finally going to get a grip?
Well, let me ask you that question, Nicole. When is the government finally going to get a grip of this?
I'm worried that they're not going to get a grip of this, and it goes back to all the different problems that we're seeing in our country. That there's so much that they can't get a grip on. That this has completely slipped down the agenda. I wish that somebody would do something with the BBC and the obvious problem it has, but just the idea that they're starting this anti-Semitism training and they're not doing it about Israel shows that how institutionalised all of this is and how problematic it is and how it's just continuously making Britain an unsafe place, not just for Jews, but for everybody, because things feel like they're getting out of control. I don't know if that's something that you feel too, but
yeah, I do.
And certainly the way the BBC is pushing these lines just feels out of control. That even though they got slapped on the wrist by their own investigation, the fact that Deborah Turners would then go on and talk about how Hamas had two separate wings when, according to the British government, according to our own laws, they don't. And yet the way she said it was almost as if we know better. She was kind of defending the fact that they had used the son of a Hamas.
As if there's any difference whatsoever.
Exactly. And just like, you know, if you're going to do that, say who he is. Don't lie. But and what I know is that what happened at the BBC is that it then became, this got pulled down because of the Zionist control, which is kind of goes back to that letter that you mentioned in The Guardian, or the editorial, all about. So every time we complain, we are then accused of trying to silence discussion on Israel.
Well, keep on broadcasting, keep on writing, and keep on complaining, because you absolutely need to, and you are really exemplifying what needs to be said and what needs to be done. So Nicole, as always, thank you. That's Nicole Lambert, the journalist who looks into these things and keeps us up to date with what's going on. There's so much to discuss. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. We're also going to be talking about the school that banned the Union flag dress. You remember this earlier this week. It's closed early over extremist threats. Stay with us here on Talk.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in, as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at. I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
Leslie says, you said Healy couldn't cancel the injunction, but Flemmingham just said that Healy would have had to reapply to carry on with the injunction. Yes, well, he can't cancel it, but he could apply to for it to be continued, so he may well have done that. Well, I'm sure that will all come out in the fullness of time, Leslie. The UK government says Andy should come up with a plan to group together the terrestrial channels, BBC, ITV, 4, 5, and group them under one UK TV subscription service. Funding from the government to the different broadcasters should be determined by viewership numbers, then cancel the TV licence. Another person says, so sad to hear those Israelis recount their time as hostages, yet Diane Abbott says Jews don't face racism. Well, we know that's absolutely nonsense. And yes, we will, great message, by the way, and we'll see the whole interview, see and hear the whole thing very, very soon in the next hour, actually. Lots more to discuss. I want to talk now about the school that banned the Union flag dress. It's now closed early for the summer over extremism threats. Earlier this week, Courtney Wright's stepfather, Stuart Field, appeared on the station to speak about the incident with my colleague Julia Hartley-Brewer.
Didn't really give me an answer as to what was wrong with the outfit. They pretty much sort of diverted me straight to we need to speak to somebody else who's better qualified to deal with this, when I was answering the question, which is give me a reason why my daughter's sat in isolation on a cultural diversity day wearing a Union Jack dress. I couldn't get my head around the reasoning behind it. I don't think the school were prepared for it. I pretty much took her out of there pretty quick and said, you know, this is to be continued, and we will take it further.
Well, now Bilton School has informed parents it's going to close early for the summer holidays in the interest of student and staff safety after claiming to have received extremist abuse online via our telephone system and via our telephone systems. Well, I'm not happy that they're getting extremist threats. What I do understand is people being very frustrated about this, because this was a young girl, 12 years old, wanting to express her British culture, and of course the little speech that she had prepared I thought was very nice and very straightforward about diversity, the traditions we all have in Britain, our politeness, our humour, she says. We drink tea, we talk about the weather a lot, and we like rugby and football. Well, Andrew Allison is with us now, who's head of campaigns at Popular Conservatives. Andrew, do you think the school was right to close early?
Well, I don't know what sort of extremist threats that they got. I mean, I heard via local councillors that many of the pupils on the last day of term today were planning to come in wearing Union Jacks and having St George's flags face paint on. That was a rumour that was going around locally. I can't verify that. But
wouldn't surprise me, though, and that would be a way of simply saying this is our culture. You know, you said you didn't want this Union flag dress, this Union Jack dress. We're actually protesting in a peaceful and reasonable way about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. You know, during all the scandals that we're hearing about these Pakistani rape gangs, these evil gangs, we keep getting told that the reason the police didn't investigate was they didn't want to inflame community tensions. Well, all this head teacher has done is inflame community tensions.
Yeah, it's about cultural diversity, but which is inclusive, except we're excluding you, despite the fact you're the majority and you want to wear this dress.
Yeah, exactly. And millions of people in this country are rightly annoyed. But it's part of a wider campaign by some people on the left to basically denigrate Britain. Back in 2002, the BBC had a 100 Greatest Britons programme where people voted. Winston Churchill came at the top. The former Northern Ireland Secretary, Dr. Molam, championed Churchill. And yet here we are 20-odd years later, and people are trying to denigrate Churchill completely and say that he was an evil, racist man. But this is just all part of a narrative that's coming from the left, that anything that Britain has done is evil and wrong.
Let me read out what the school told parents. Ranjit Samra, who is Chief Executive of Stowe Valley Multi-Academy Trust, and Jane Delves, who's head teacher at Bilton School, said staff had also been threatened after Courtney's father, Stuart Field, shared online that he had to collect her from school because of her inappropriate attire. A letter to parents said the nature and tone of this abuse has escalated in recent days, including personal threats to staff. While we have been working closely with our multi-agency partners to address the situation, our primary responsibility remains the safety and well-being of every child and member of staff. This is not a decision we've taken lightly. We understand the disruption this may cause to your families and your child's education, but the safety of our school community must come first. The letter ended by thanking parents and guardians for their understanding and continued support during a very, very challenging time. I mean, they brought the challenging time on themselves by not simply very reasonably saying, you're talking about culture, you're talking about cultural diversity. One culture in this country is being British and being Indigenous and from this country. You're one person wearing a Union Jack dress, which lots of people, lots of immigrants to this country are very, very happy to fly that flag once they become assimilated. I mean, this was just asking for trouble.
Yes, it was, Peter. You're absolutely correct. I mean, she did absolutely nothing wrong, and I mean, Courtney seems a very bright girl, doesn't she? I mean, you've read the speech that she would have given, and it was also full of humour. I mean, she's absolutely right. Just about every conversation that a British person has seems to include the weather, and she was talking about sort of enjoying fish and chips and other things like that, and it was an absolutely fantastic speech. And she also said, importantly in that speech, that it is right to celebrate other cultures, but don't forget British culture. And I'm proud of British culture, and there is nothing wrong with that. And the school has definitely brought it on themselves. And I really do think that the head teacher needs to be considering her position.
This is Jane Dells, who you're talking about, saying, I also want to extend the apology to everyone who may have felt hurt, uncomfortable or unsettled by what happened. As a school, we recognise that we don't always get things right. When mistakes happen, it's important we are open, transparent and reflective. Well, one thing they're not today is open, because they're closing. They're closing early for the summer holidays. Listen, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. That is just more nonsense from that school. Andrew Allison speaking a lot of sense. Of course, he's head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism at the Popcons. Thank you to Rachel as well, who's been in touch and says, good afternoon, Peter. Can you tell me how a senior executive at the BBC on nearly £500,000 after making outrageously ignorant, inflammatory comments is still in post? The video of Deborah Turness is a clear example of someone who has a very poor understanding of current affairs, not a chief executive of a state broadcaster, says Rachel. I'm afraid I completely agree with you, Rachel, and completely disagree with Deborah Turness. We're going to talk to Nigel Evans in just a minute after the news. He's the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, about so many different issues, about that leak, the Afghan leak, about kneecap, about the asylum seekers living in taxpayer-funded hotels charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and grievous bodily harm. We'll also hear the interview about the Israeli hostages, Aviva and Keith, who I spoke to yesterday. We want your comments and thoughts on all of this as well. 0344 499 1000.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, and you're with me on Drive. Maybe you're one of the car dwellers heading home for the evening and indeed the weekend. Loads to discuss, including the fact that there are so many people getting in touch with us this evening about the hundreds of asylum seekers living in taxpayer-funded hotels that have been charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and grievous bodily harm. We'll talk about the hostages who've been in Gaza. We'll be speaking to two of them a little bit later on. And we will be talking as well about Kneecap. No further action after an investigation into their Glastonbury show where they incited a riot. Lots to discuss. Is it two-tier justice? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note. Keep it to less than a minute, please, if you wouldn't mind. You can also send me a text message via WhatsApp and give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. And I should say that I'm here, of course, until 7. Kevin O'Sullivan here between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then between 9 and 10 it'll be What Just Happened. And at 10 o'clock, the Talk presenter and broadcasting titan James Whale has given what he says is his final interview amid his terminal cancer battle. And his most compelling interview to date. An emotional James Whale sat down with the Reform UK leader and his long-time friend Nigel Farage at James's home in Kent as he looked back on his legendary broadcasting career and the world of politics. You can watch and listen to the full interview at 10 o'clock tonight. Here's just a taster for you.
Thanks, Nigel.
James, you're a complete star.
I hope I've got more than a few weeks, but...
Well, so do I.
That's really made me...
So do I. And you never know, miracles do happen.
They do. They do.
They do happen. Well, your career's been a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it has, considering I had no A-levels, O-levels, CSEs, or even a letter after my name for broadcasting.
You said to me the other day, you've never really had a job.
I haven't.
Well, that whole interview at 10 o'clock tonight, of course, on the station. We send James our very best wishes. He's certainly, over the last 4 years that I've been presenting programmes on the station, James has given me an awful lot of excellent advice and pointers, and he's helped me in many ways. He is a great man and has had an amazing career, and it's right that we look back on that, and I will certainly be tuning in at 10 o'clock tonight to see that remarkable interview with Nigel Farage. I know some of the people behind the scenes here who were, of course, involved in it, and they say it is just such a special thing to have been involved with, and it'll be a special thing to watch as well. And James, if you're watching, we of course send you and your wife and your whole family our very, very best wishes. I want to talk now to Nigel Evans, who's the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. He's also a former Conservative MP for Ribble Valley. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you?
Thanks very much for having me again, Peter. And can I start by saying as well that, listen, I've been involved in the world of politics for over 50 years, and I can remember growing up listening to James Whale many a night, a wonderful journalist. He was basically somebody who was well ahead of his time, and the bravery of him doing this interview that we just saw the clip of, how moving must that have been. What a wonderful man. And I send James Whale and his family my very, very best wishes. Really, really very moving.
Well, thank you, Nigel. That whole interview, of course, at 10 o'clock tonight. Let me ask you, Nigel, about some of the stories that are in the news today. This statistical analysis by the Sun newspaper about hundreds of asylum seekers living in taxpayer-funded hotels being charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and GBH. Some of the statistics are really quite scary. Of the court cases monitored by the Sun, 29 cases were sexual crimes, including 7 alleged rapes, 1 proven incident of exposure and 1 of attempting to engage in sexual communication with a child. 64 other violence-related offences, including common assault, GBH, ABH, possessing a knife and possessing an imitation firearm.
Yeah, I understand as well, Peter, that that is only basically part of an analysis. That's because right. They weren't looking at the full number of places where these refugees are staying. So the figure is going to be a lot higher than that.
That's right. There are 105. There are 105 hotels that are in the public domain, and a further 105 that aren't in the public domain. So it could be even less than half.
Well, statistically, it's got to be a lot more, isn't it? So the thing that it sort of spells to me is that when they are looking at these people who are coming into the country, what sort of due regard are they giving to whether any of these people have committed crimes in the country that they're coming from? Quite frankly, we shouldn't be harbouring people who have committed crimes in their own countries. I think it's hugely alarming, quite frankly, and even worse, I think, is the fact that it's just been revealed that we've got thousands more Afghanistan refugees coming into the country because of that appalling leak that happened. And how many of them, the vast majority of them, it appears to me, were never in any danger whatsoever. The vast majority of them on that list were just trying to get into the United Kingdom. And even then, we will know nothing about their backgrounds. They've really got to do due diligence, this government, because in many cases, clearly, by what has happened in the past, being revealed by the Sun, that the lives of people have been endangered.
Tell me about your thoughts on the protesters clashing with police outside the Essex Migrant Hotel. This was, of course, a peaceful protest, and then some members of that protest were not peaceful, and of course we can't condone that at all. What we can perhaps understand is the frustration many local people feel when an area is taken over by, or a hotel is taken over by migrants who are there, especially if it involves some of them, as these statistics would suggest, who are committing crimes.
Yeah, I can't justify any demonstrations that turn violent by people who just turn up and they're just looking for a fight. I can't justify that at all. But what I can draw from it is that many members of the public have had enough. They can see what's happened in the past. They were told that the government would get a grip on illegal asylum seekers coming into the country. It clearly hasn't happened. There are record numbers of people now coming into the United Kingdom, and there does appear to be problems with some of these people coming in committing crimes. And I'm afraid if it's seen that the police aren't doing their job, or that these people are being allowed in, then it is going to lead to, I'm afraid, some people making demonstrations in the way that they are. But they should be peaceful, Peter, you're absolutely right. But it should be a warning signal to the authorities that they must be seen to be taking action. And that starts from the government and goes all the way down. As far as the police are concerned, they've got to be seen to be taking action against anybody who's committing crime, irrespective of whether they are asylum seekers or not. And as far as the government is concerned, they have got to be seen to be taking action against boat people coming in. And I'm afraid all that hullabaloo last week when we had the French president coming over and everybody's cheered from within the Labour ranks and from President Macron with this one in, one out scheme, which is only a very small number of people. It's a pilot. And as somebody said the other day, it's actually 17 in and one out. I mean, it's absolutely appalling, and it just simply doesn't work. And people have had enough. And it's about time that the government did get a grip. It promised it would, and they just simply haven't.
Nigel, we'll come back to our discussion in a second, but there's just been some breaking news from the United States. At least 3 people have been killed after what's been called a horrific incident at a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department training facility. That's according to the U.S. Attorney General. There was an explosion at the Biscaynes, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Biscaynes Center Academy training, according to the broadcaster NBC. The incident was reported at about 3:30 our time, but we're only getting news of it now, and that's at least 3 people have been killed after this horrific incident at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department training facility. Some sort of explosion at a training academy, according to NBC. We'll bring you more news on that when we have it. Nigel, perhaps we can return to the UK and talk about this very serious leak of information and the injunctions that were put on it. We now know that UK Special Forces, MI6 spies and military officers have been named in the Afghan data leak. I just wonder, if you had been Defence Secretary at the time, would you have injuncted it? Because I just wonder whether you think what Sir Ben Wallace did at the time was actually the right course of action.
I can understand why Ben did what he did, but it was only intended ever to be for a short space of time. I think it was he was looking at 4 months, and it was only an ordinary injunction. I'm not an expert in injunctions or super injunctions. I've never taken one out myself. But the fact that it went on for 2 years and it actually straddled over two governments does seem to me to be incredibly worrying. That's number one. Number two, that there is the Intelligence and Security Committee in the House of Commons, which is part of the House of Lords, part of the House of Commons, is currently chaired by Lord Beamish. They've all signed the Official Secrets Act. And the fact that they were kept out of the loop as well seems to me incredibly worrying. I mean, the one person who I think was told about it was the Speaker, and he was served with the same injunction that said that he couldn't mention it. It does seem to be incredibly disproportionate. And surely the risks involved to the people should have been done well more quickly than 2 years. And the fact is that we know that so many people on that list were just simply nothing to do with the British Armed Forces whatsoever. They were trying it on. They wanted to come across to the United Kingdom. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that this list was sent from somebody from within the armed forces to somebody who was responsible for checking the lists. And then again, Peter, how appallingly stupid was it for them not to have proper protocols in place, which meant that they were going to handle this sensitive information as if they were handling nuclear waste. I mean, the fact that they got it wrong really does make me angry, because this now did jeopardize at least some of the lives of those who were on the list. But at the same time, it's cost the British taxpayer, it may be up to £7 billion. This is absolutely appalling. And it also then begs the question about, are there other super injunctions that are out there? Those who will know about them aren't able to talk about them because they are super injunctions. And I think that we ought to be told, if there are super injunctions out there, at least in which realm are they? And you've got to have some sort of audit, checking government, that they're not suppressing journalists from investigating and holding to account the government of the day. And I think that there should be some way of there being a proper audit, and the Intelligence and Security Committee absolutely well within their remit for them to look at this.
Well, they would be the right people to look into that. Just before you go, Nigel, I just want to ask you about this school that banned a Union flag dress closing early over extremist threats. I'm sure neither of us would want anybody to be threatened by extremists, but didn't the school make a problem for itself in banning someone from wearing a dress which had the flag of the country on it?
Well, when you're talking about diversity, surely it means diversity of all fashions, all countries, all traditions, all costumes, which also includes the United Kingdom. And for them to take the decision that somebody shouldn't be proud of their own background, I've got no doubt whatsoever that there are people from all sorts of backgrounds in schools all over the United Kingdom who are proud of the traditions that they brought from that country to the United Kingdom, and they don't want to forget it. I can understand all of that. But why you should denigrate somebody from the United Kingdom from being proud to demonstrate the fact that they're from the UK. And I've read all about what this young girl was doing, and she was going to talk about some of the idiosyncrasies of being British. And some of them are quite funny. And I think everybody would have welcomed that sort of approach, instead of which a high-handed approach was taken by the school. I mean, they really do need to work out who was responsible for this. And I do really feel sorry for the girl. And I feel sorry for some of the other pupils who must be scratching their heads. They got it completely wrong, absolutely wrong. And I do hope as well that there are other schools throughout the United Kingdom who are looking at this and taking the lessons from what went wrong in this school. And if they do have any of these diversity days, then they really should be very careful to include all customs and cultures, and that includes the British culture. But I'm proud to be British, I really am.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed. That's Nigel Evans there, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. Graham's given us a ring about this. Graham is in Kent and has dialed me on 0344 499 1000. Graham, what would you like to say about the school dress?
Good afternoon, Pete, and I'm exceptionally worried about all this, really, to be honest with you. We now have 17-year-olds voting. I understand the Labour Party want to put political lessons into schools. This is clearly gerrymandering the vote. It's anti-democratic, and I don't know what we're going to do about this, because we keep on saying, well, we hope the schools will wake up to things. We know that the schools, the unions are very left-wing, and I think this is a terrible situation that's going to develop, where kids are going to be taught about left-wing principles.
Well, I'm very happy if they're given lessons in, what is voting, what is a council, what is Westminster, what does this actually mean, why should you vote, why is it important to vote. But if they're told how to vote, or even if it's by implication how they should vote, well, that's not something that schools should be doing. Schools should be impartial.
If we look at Bilton School, however, they clearly aren't impartial. There will be teachers standing up in classrooms and giving their left-wing views to pupils, and I think this should be checked. I don't believe that you should be able to gerrymander the voting system like this and get away with it.
Graham, I agree with every word you've said. Thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Liz has been in touch and says Starmer is doing all this damage to our country deliberately. It's his way of getting back at us for Brexit. The more damage he does, the better. Kevin in Barnstable says the salary paid by the BBC to his staff should be embarrassing to them. I don't believe for a second that if they tried even just a little bit, that they wouldn't replace Deborah Turness with someone who would do it with the equal prospect of success for the minimum wage. The same goes for Alan Shearer, by the way. These people must love themselves enormously, given the payments they're happy to collect for giving their time to such little effect, says Kevin in Barnstable. And thanks to Tad in Cambridge, who says, I'm astounded at two-tier justice. Do the powers that be not realise the bitterness and resentment this foolish policy causes? Those who aren't yet engaged will be motivated by this injustice. It also goes against one of the cornerstones of British identity, which is fairness. The authorities are storing a whole lot of trouble for themselves. That is Tad Davison in Cambridge. So thank you to him. We're going to talk in just a second to another one of our guests, who is Elliot Wilson, writer and former House of Commons clerk, and then we will hear about the sport and also that interview with the Israeli hostages that I conducted yesterday, Aviva Siegel and Keith Siegel. All of that coming up before the end of the programme. Loads to discuss. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch. Bobby says on the girl in the Spice Girl dress, I think if she was wearing a Palestinian dress, she would probably have got Student of the Year and expelled if she wore an Israel dress. That is Bobby in Chiswick. Hi Peter, says Leslie. I highly respect Nigel Evans, the former Deputy Speaker, very fair, unlike the current Speaker. Another Debbie says, my son walked out of a school because he was being taught he was white privileged. I backed him all the way and never returned to that school. Rob says, I thought the Speaker had parliamentary privilege. Surely he could have spoken about this Afghanistan debacle, says Rob. That is true, as could any parliamentarian. They have parliamentary privilege. They can say what they like, and they can certainly, that can then be reported by the media in a straightforward way if they want to do that. Just to remind you, the breaking news out of America, at least 3 people have been killed in a horrific incident at a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department training facility, according to the US Attorney General. There was an explosion. You can see the facility on the screen if you're watching live pictures there from Los Angeles at an academy training facility. There's, according to the broadcaster NBC reporting this, the incident was reported around 3:30 today, but the details just coming out now. That is at least 3 people killed after a horrific incident at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department training facility, according to the US Attorney General. We will bring you more on that as soon as we have any further details. From what I can see there appears to be a problem on the roof. Part of the roof seems to be off there, and certainly there are many vehicles and ambulances and so on around there, including police vehicles, as you would expect at the training facility. So any further detail on that, we will of course bring it to you here on Talk. Let's have a chat now with Elliot Wilson. He's a writer and former House of Commons clerk. Elliot, I want to talk to you about a number of issues around today, but particularly the anti-Semitism training at the BBC. Just to remind ourselves what the Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, said in an all-staff discussion in the last 48 hours. This is what she said about Hamas.
I think it's really important that we are clear that Abdullah's father was a Deputy Agriculture Minister and therefore, was a member of the Hamas-run government, which is different to being part of the military wing of Hamas. And I think externally, it's often simplified that he was in Hamas, and I think it's an important point of detail that we need to continually remind people of the difference and of that connection.
An important point of difference, Elliot?
No, I don't think so at all. Hamas is a terrorist organization which happens also to run the Gaza Strip. Would she make the same distinction between a member of the Iranian government and, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps? These are all parts of the same political and military organizations. That seems not only a mistaken distinction, but actually perverse to go out of your way to make it.
And you would wonder why she necessarily has to do that. In terms of the anti-Semitism training being given to the BBC, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement of their coverage, certainly of the Middle East in the last while, if this training has to be given. Maybe it's a positive step. What do you think?
I think if it benefits some people, it's never a bad thing. And my worry is always about any kind of diversity training, is that the people who take it seriously are the people who don't need it, and the people who do need it will ignore it.
Yeah.
But I do think there is, it's very difficult to get the balance right on an issue as complex as the Middle East. And usually, if you can manage to be criticised by both sides, then you're doing quite well. I don't think the BBC's quite got there yet. But we are living in an age where certainly you see the kind of anti-Semitism casually in public that I don't think you would have seen 5, certainly 10 years ago, which I think is deeply worrying.
Well, tell us a little bit about this Robert Jenrick row with Reform UK, because this is Zia Youssef or his staff accidentally liking an anti-Semitic tweet against Robert Jenrick. I wonder what you make of this today.
I think politicians need to be very, very careful about the access they give to their social media, because if they, we understand that politicians are very busy and that going through social media takes a lot of time. But if you outsource it to young, inexperienced staffers, as I assume Zia Youssef is saying he did, then they are going to make mistakes. They're not going to read context. But you have to be incredibly careful about what you retweet, because it seems such a quick thing. You sort of scan, read it, and you click on the right button. But there on the internet for everyone to see, you suddenly endorse something which is fairly foul anti-Semitism, and not even hiding beneath a veil of propriety. So I think I'm assuming this doesn't reflect Zia Youssef's beliefs.
Well, he has said, one of the team who boast to my ex account accidentally pressed like on an awful anti-Semitic tweet earlier today. I apologise for this. The post also refers to brown savages and is equally racist against me. Clearly it was not intentional. The amount of anti-Semitism and racism on this platform is spiralling out of control, and I hope that changes soon. But Robert Jenrick has hit back and says that he calls, well, I'll not say the word because it's 5:30. I can say it in context. Okay, great. Robert Jenrick says, I call bullshit. You've spent the last 48 hours calling me a traitor and not drawing attention to a leaked spreadsheet with our special forces and MI6 officers' names on, but we are meant to believe this tweet attacking me as a traitor for having my Jewish wife and family was liked accidentally by one of the team. You must think we're all thick. No, the mask is slipped. Likes are private. You thought nobody would ever know. Unfortunately for you, the racist account who posted the tweet and could see the likes exposed you. Reform should give you the boot, says Robert Jenrick. So a war of words between those two. We did ask both men to come on the show today. Just a final thought from you, Elliot. Does this now go away?
No, I don't think it does. I think there's clearly very bad blood between Robert Jenrick and some members of Reform. Whether they're arguing over the same space or whatever in politics, I don't know. But clearly, this is not a nice relationship. This goes much deeper than that. So this will happen again and again, and social media will allow it to happen.
Thank you very much. That's Elliot Wilson there, who's a writer and the former clerk of the Commons. Appreciate him joining us today. Former House of Commons clerk, I should say. We're going to talk in a second about the sport, but we'll also hear just after the break of that interview I did yesterday with two Israeli hostages, man and wife. Horrific story, taken from their kibbutz, kidnapped by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October. The woman, Aviva, was released after 51 days. Keith released after 484 days. Her husband, they're both fighting for the release of the 50 remaining hostages. Very moving interview. I spoke to them yesterday. We'll play it out in just a minute. You're not going to want to miss this here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
On the 7th of October 2023, there were about 251 people who were taken as hostages from Israel, brought into Gaza, kept in horrific conditions. 50 of them are still there. We think about 20 of them are alive. Many of them have been freed. Many of them have died. Many of them in these absolutely horrendous sort of ceremonies, essentially handed over to the Red Cross and then brought back into Israel. Aviva Siegel is someone I've spoken to. She's a woman, a great fighter, really, really interesting person as well, such passion. She was taken hostage and was there for 51 days, initially alongside her husband Keith. Keith was kept for a lot longer by Hamas terrorists, 484 days. I sat down with both of them yesterday. They are going around the world talking to leaders. They've met Trump, they've met people like President Biden as well. They've spoken to senior leaders here in the UK as well, flying the flag and hoping that these hostages who are still there get back as soon as possible. Aviva even told me that she doesn't feel free herself. She doesn't feel she has real liberty and won't until the hostages are back. We know there's a dreadful war in Gaza. We know that many civilians are suffering on both sides of the border. We know that we all want it to end very, very soon, but the personal, the psychological war will continue for Aviva and Keith, who spoke to me very openly and very movingly in this interview that I did yesterday morning with them here in London.
Yes, I am constantly thinking about the 50 hostages that remain in captivity. Trying to do whatever I can to participate in the incredible efforts of so many people to bring them back home as soon as possible.
Aviva, can you just talk us through the time on the 7th of October, what happened to you and to Keith?
Keith and I were sleeping, and there was the first alarm. We ran into our little shelter, and we didn't even close the door because we don't have time. We're very, very close to the border. So we hid ourselves and we thought it's finished. And when we walked out of the room, out of the shelter, we saw through the window all the missiles that were going all over Israel and the whistling, and our house was shaking and it looked like the end of the world. We were back into our little shelter, and I remember looking at Keith and saying, it sounds like the end of the world. What's happening here? We didn't know what's happening because we were disconnected, and the girl that gave us the message what to do, when to do on the kibbutz, she was murdered very, very shortly after it started, and nobody took her job because everybody was trying to figure out what's happening and to keep alive.
Sounds chaotic and terrifying.
It was just the worst that anybody can ever think about. We knew that it's really, really big and large. We knew that there were terrorists on the kibbutz. We knew that people were killed, and we were very, very scared for our lives. Didn't know if they're going to burn us. And when we did step out of the window while we were pulled by the Hamas terrorists, we did see fires in some of the houses, so we knew that people were burnt. And I didn't know anything until I came back. And I just want to say that when I heard what happened in Israel, I was just so disgusted. And I could just say that the people that did what they did on the 7th were the people that took care of us, because they were brutal to us all the time. There wasn't a second that they were nice to us.
You were held hostage for 51 days. You saw some horrific things there. This interview will go out at a time when children might be listening, so we've got to be careful what we say. But just give us a flavour of what you saw and what you experienced.
Well, I was there. I'm a witness of one of the girls, a Hamas terrorist, did whatever he wanted to her. And I was very worried, and it was very difficult for me to see that because I really, really loved her already. We became like one big, huge family, and I couldn't even help her. The only thing that I could do is look at her in the eyes and try and comfort her after what she went through. I saw them torturing Keith and torturing one of the hostages. They beated her, and I saw too many things, felt so many things. I was starved, I was thirsty, I wasn't allowed to move. My back was caught and I was sore all the time. And to watch Keith suffering from his ribs that were broken and his sore that was on his hand, from them just shooting us on the way, was tremendous for me.
How much of the time that you were in captivity were the two of you together then? Was that all of the time or most of the time?
I was with Keith for the first 50 days. And then I had one day that I was without Keith that I didn't know what's going to happen to me, if they're going to rape me or touch me or kill me. And I didn't even know if I'll ever see Keith again or if I'll ever see my family.
Keith, you were there for 484 days, but you were told at one stage that you would be released alongside Aviva, but then you weren't. That must have been just so even more difficult than everything else that was together, psychological torture.
Yes, that's correct. I was also relieved that Aviva was going to be released. I was hoping that that was the case, and it was true. But it was a combination of relief and worrying about what Aviva would go through until she got home, and not knowing if she had made it home, because they did not show that to us. They showed us her release on television, but the the television channel did not show any coverage of the hostages arriving in Israel, so I didn't know. And there was a lot of hostility. The mobs were surrounding the Red Cross vehicle, and they were pounding on the vehicle. They were screaming. It's a very hostile, violent atmosphere. And that's how I saw Aviva getting into the Red Cross vehicle and leaving.
Tell us about the conditions that you were held in.
I was kicked and spat on and cursed just out of the blue by one of the terrorists. I was instructed to lie on my back and not move. That's what I did. And he came up to me just out of the blue, no provocation, nothing that I had done, and did what he did. I also witnessed other hostages, including a woman hostage that was beaten and had a gun pointed to her head. Actually, the gun was on her head, and the terrorist was threatening to kill her. And I saw this woman, they brought me into the room where she was being tortured. And when I say torture, I mean it in the most literal sense. Her hands were tied, her feet were tied. They had put tape across her mouth. And one of them was standing behind her, holding a sharp metal rod that was on her forehead, and he was applying pressure to her forehead. I saw, and I witnessed torture of, I witnessed violence and verbal abuse and physical abuse, sexual abuse of women, and I personally experienced sexual abuse, and I also saw other hostages experiencing that. Locked up in a room by myself with no windows, no light, and had to beg for them to open the door so that I could go to the toilet. I was never clean in Gaza for 484 days. The rare opportunities that I was given to put water on my body is what I describe it, because that's what it was, a bucket with water, and just having to pour it over my body, and then given clothes that smell bad, and that's what I put on after that.
You were moved various times as well, weren't you? There was no permanence, there was no sense of any kind of consistency, was there?
Yes, I was relocated 33 times, moved, and tunnels. I was held in tunnels and in schools, apartments and homes. There was never a routine, never knew how long we were going to go without food, and we went without food for extended periods of time. Starved, and water was scarce. Had to beg for water, and felt physically terrible for a lot of the time, weak, exhausted, in pain.
Aviva, you knew roughly the kind of conditions that Keith was in, but for you, for a long period of his captivity, you had your freedom, but he did not.
I wasn't free at all. I wasn't free, and I'm not free yet. To think about all these hostages that are still in Gaza, chained, hidden, starving. I lost hope while I was there. I was thought that I was forgotten, and Hamas is responsible for all what I went through and what Keith went through, and they are responsible of taking us with our pajamas, innocent people that didn't do harm to anybody ever. And I just want to say that what happened on the 7th, that families were killed in such a brutal way, burnt, and mothers were raped in front of their families. And the Nova, they stood in a line to rape the girls in front of the boys, and then killed the girl and then killed the boy. And what happened on the 7th was beyond any humanity. It's not a war. It was nothing to do with the war. It was just cruelty, and not much has been done to bring back all the 50 hostages that are still there, that we know that 20 of them are still begging and suffering. We know of hostages that lost half their body weight. Keith lost 30 kilos while he was in captivity.
Are you confident that 20 hostages that are alive will come back someday? How do you feel about that?
I'm very, very worried. If it won't happen soon, they might not come back. And I do know that being in a war, in a place where there's war, it's dangerous. People could be hurt. And I know that the Hamas terrorists use their people to be in dangerous places. They should not be there. People should not be in a place where there's war. They should be able to get out of there. But Hamas is forcing them to stay. And they need to bring back the hostages that are suffering and begging to get out of there.
Keith, do you feel the Israeli government is doing enough for the hostages that are there at the moment? And do you feel the course of action your government is taking is the right one in Gaza?
I am here to call upon my government, and I'm here to call upon President Trump and the U.S. administration and the mediating countries to all engage immediately in negotiations that will secure the release of the 50 hostages still held in Gaza.
Keith, there are many people who march here in London every 2 weeks in favour of the Palestinian cause. Not all of them, but some of them will hold posters in support of Hamas, in support of Hezbollah, for example. What's your message as a former hostage to them?
My message is that any decent moral person is against murder and against carrying out terrorist attacks. And Aviva described some of the atrocities, and I also mentioned them. What decent people murder babies? What decent people murder elderly people, innocent people that did nothing to provoke this? And I call upon them to stand, to call upon the Palestinian people to speak out against terrorism and to speak out against loss of life, and Hamas that carried out the attack on October the 7th is responsible from what happened on October the 7th until today. And it's their decision. It was their decision to carry out this attack, and it's their decision, and if they decide to do that, the war will stop. The hostages will be released, and there will be peace and security for all.
Thank you both very much, Keith and Aviva Siegel, for speaking to Talk.
Thank you.
Well, that was yesterday. Keith and Aviva are on their travels again. They've gone to America, where they are going to talk more about this and keep talking about those hostages who are, of course, being held captive, 50 of them, by Hamas terrorists. We know there's a dreadful war going on in Gaza. We want that to end as soon as it can, and we want there to be peace in that region, and that's certainly what Keith and Aviva want. They're from a kibbutz. They're a very peace-loving people. They didn't want this war. They didn't want to be taken hostage, and we know that there are so many people who are caught up in this. A really moving interview. It was a real privilege to speak to them both. I'd be very interested to hear what you thought of that interview. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody getting in touch about that interview. There are a number of people who have done so, including Bob in Cheltenham, who said just watching that interview, very moving and brilliantly done. So thank you to Bob for that. Lots more people getting in touch. We'll talk more about that after we talk about the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Well, Neil Kandula is with us, the TalkSport presenter. Great to have you in the studio. How are you doing?
Yes, a very good evening now. Yeah, evening.
Just about 10 to 6.
Yes, the sunny weather outside always confuses me a little bit.
Well, indeed.
Yes.
A very dramatic night for the Lionesses last night. They're through to the semi-finals of the Women's Euros. Talk us through this.
Yeah, it was quite phenomenal, really. They were 2-0 down. I think it was about 11 minutes left, and 2 goals within the space of a couple of minutes really changed the whole format of the game itself. It went to penalties. There was a lot of drama, but they ended up winning the penalty shootout 3-2. They're, of course, now in the semi-finals after losing their first game to France in the opening game. It was a bit of a disappointing start, should we say, but they're here now. They're in this moment, and I just think it's such a testament. You know, I was seeing a lot of positivity on the old X timeline last night, and look, we understand and we get the fact that there's so many people who don't like it and who are all against it, which on one hand I understand you don't have to be in it, but you don't have to really bring it down. But I think last night's game, the heroics, I think that really shut the people up, to be honest with you. It can be just as entertaining. It was a really brilliant moment for the Lionesses, so hopefully anyway, now they're into the final 4, they can really push on and get another Euros under their belt. So yeah, really exciting even for the Lionesses last night.
And some big developments in the transfer market today. Neil, tell us about those.
Yeah, so much going on. This is always my personal favourite moment of the summer, is the transfer window. So much is happening, and one big story today has been confirmed. Noni Madueke has left Chelsea just across the pond in London to go join Arsenal. It was a £52 million move. There was actually a petition from Arsenal fans saying that he doesn't deserve to play for Arsenal because he's not good enough. I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. How can you write someone off before they've even started the job? But the manager, Mikel Arteta, he's given his comments today, and he said that he believes he's one of the most talented players in that position in the Premier League. So a lot of ratings, shall we say, in terms of what the Arsenal hierarchy believe in this young individual. So yeah, a really exciting move on that front. Manchester United finally have agreed a deal with Brentford for Bryan Mbeumo. This one has been going on for weeks and weeks. The deal initially is for £65 million, but it could rise north of 70 with add-ons and certain criteria being met. This will be a real boost for Manchester United fans. Of course, they had their worst season ever in the Premier League last season, finishing 15th. A really dismal and rather forgettable campaign. But players like this, Premier League proven. He scored 20 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League alone last season. So some welcome goals in that department for Manchester United. West Ham, they've agreed personal terms with Kyle Walker-Peters after he left Southampton on a free transfer. So I think it's safe to say so much going on. Liverpool, just finally in terms of the transfers, they're set to sign Hugo Ekitike from Frankfurt. A bid of 70 million has gone in. He did have a little bit of interest from Newcastle amongst other clubs, but it seems like the Premier League champions, who of course are going for back-to-back Premier League titles, will get their man in that forward line. So yeah, as I say, so much going on in the transfer world at the moment.
Let's talk about golf in my part of the world. The Open continuing this weekend. Tell us about the leaders today.
Yeah, Hao Tong Lee, he surges into contention. He went bogey 3 through the front 9. He's really put himself right up there. Will he be there over the next couple of days? Remains to be seen. Rory McIlroy, he was making certainly a lot of praise from the crowd into his direction. He battled 70 on day 2, finishing 3 under. Few brilliant birdies in there that puts him firmly into contention, as well as Scotty Scheffler. I think think this one, of course, with his comments in the week about his motivation, and sometimes he doesn't really, feel the same optimism, shall we say, for these competitions, because as soon as you've won one, someone's already asking you about the next competition. So he's right in there as well. Another fantastic day from the Open, so hopefully that will continue over the weekend.
Tell us about boxing as well. Huge weekend. Daniel Dubois returning to the ring at Wembley Stadium. Is he going to leave his opponent Usyk as apparent?
Yeah, this one is a monumental fight. Of course, we have all the rights on talkSPORT tomorrow evening. This one is not one to be missed. Of course, they both had a fight back in 2023, I believe. Dubois didn't come out on top. He did get punished for what was a low blow, but he doesn't think it was a low blow. So some of his comments leading up to the fight is that he's got a few wrongs to right in that department. But yeah, this is a phenomenal fight. It's the first time this country will ever hold all 4 bouts being held in the heavyweight division. So a monumental occasion. Can Daniel Dubois do it? I think it's a massive testament to his journey in terms of where he is at the moment. A few years ago, if you were to say he would be in this blockbuster fight, I think a few people would be surprised. But at this moment, given his performances, especially against the likes of Anthony Joshua, that really put him into the forefront of the heavyweight division. But yeah, this is going to be a monumental fight. If you're going to ask me for a tip, I probably would say Usyk. I know he's 38. That's been a little bit of conversation. Will he be able to perform at the highest level? But I do think he's just too much to handle for a lot of fighters. But whatever happens, of course, we'll be right across it on talkSPORT.
Absolutely, full coverage on talkSPORT. And Neil, thank you very much indeed. That was Neil Candola there, talkSPORT presenter, bringing us right up to date with all of the sport, and thank you to him for that. Thank you to everybody who's been in touch about the interview I just did a minute ago as well with Aviva and Keith Siegel. Peter in Croydon says we need to keep hearing the human stories. I remember Aviva being interviewed by Sky Australia, and that was moving too. It doesn't surprise me at all that Aviva and Keith are spreading their message, and together, says Peter in Croydon. Well, thank you for that. And Leslie says, what a moving and heartrending interview. What makes people behave in such a barbaric way? I pray all the hostages are released soon. Sean in Grimsby says the Palestinians are absolute savages. No one who's a decent person turns up with their children to watch the return of coffins of dead kids. That is, they are animals. Well, not all the Palestinians are by any stretch of the imagination, Sean. Certainly the ones who support Hamas, I don't have any sympathy for whatsoever. And there are people who do, of course, support Hamas in the Palestinian territories. There are those who fight against them and try to make sure that they are stood up to. Amazing and very moving interview, says Lynn, which should be broadcast nationally, and then all these demonstrators can be educated. Shame on our national broadcasters like the BBC and Sky who are so biased in support of Gaza. In fairness, Lynn, the BBC were there yesterday. They did interview Keith and Aviva, certainly. I haven't seen the coverage of that so far, but I know that Keith has been interviewed by them before. Such a moving interview. You're kind and caring. This really should make people think. Well, thank you for that as well. And Paula says, thank you for your continued support for the Jewish community and the atrocious attacks. After the atrocious attacks of the 7th of October, I'm mortified. Many people refuse to acknowledge the truth. I share that mortification, Paula, let me tell you. On the Afghan data leak, Mark in Lincolnshire has been in touch and has given us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi.
Great show as ever, my friend.
Thank you.
Basically, yeah, the whole Afghan thing, I mean, it's obviously something of a scandal. When it turns out your own government turn out to be, people smugglers themselves. Always a bit of an eyebrow raiser, isn't it? But the thing with the Afghan situation, since 2001, since the start of the Afghan war, basically, till we pulled out, we've already taken in, estimated between 110 and 130,000 Afghans. Mm-hmm. So this 20-odd thousand is a drop in the ocean,
it's not very many more. I just wonder what you think about the fact that this was injuncted at the start, because I think Ben Wallace was probably right to do that, to say these people are at severe risk, as are MI6 officers. We can injunct this for a few months and then return to it. What do you think of that, Mark?
Regarding the injunction, I think it's a bit of a difficult one, isn't it? Because from my understanding of the Afghan thing, particularly the way the Americans left, they left all sorts there. There were laptops, computers, files, all sorts of stuff. So it's a little bit tricky. I mean, from my understanding of it, the Taliban were aware of it pretty quickly anyway. They had access to it fairly quickly. So I don't really see why it had to be, maintained for as long as it was.
Yeah, I think that's a big question, and parliamentary scrutiny certainly wasn't there in a way that it could have been there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've just managed to do this without, as you say, no scrutiny at all. I mean, the whole super injunction thing, I'm not so sure about that either. I mean,
that was the court's decision, though, rather than the Ministry of Defence. It's a really complicated affair. Do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of it, Mark?
I highly doubt it. There's going to be too many people with their skin in the game, shall we say, that will allow this kind of thing to come out too much. I mean, if it had been... I mean, you could actually technically blame all of this on Labour as much as Tory, because it was a Labour government when we went into Afghanistan.
Yeah, and also they didn't need to necessarily continue the injunction as well. It's a complicated one. Yeah.
If they were the ones that had taken out that injunction, would they have would they have allowed it?
Would they have done the same thing? It's a really interesting point, Mark, and one we're going to get into with Colonel James Sunderland, who's a former MP, former chair of the Veterans Committee, chair of the Armed Forces Bill Select Committee. He knows his stuff on this, and we're going to talk to him in just a few minutes after the news. We'll also speak to Michael Yaki about Trump and Epstein and find out what's in the Sun tomorrow. Want your thoughts as well? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk Drive. Thank you so much for your company. I'm Peter Cardwell, here until 7 o'clock. Lots to discuss, including UK Special Forces MI6 spies and military officers have been named in the Afghan data leak. We'll talk as well about the costs of the protests about the war in the Middle East, £27 million in the last year alone. We'll talk about Trump as well. He denies that he wrote a lewd birthday note for Jeffrey Epstein, as there's a request now for a release of court papers. We're also going to find out what is in the Sun tomorrow and hear from you as well. Loads to discuss. Let me know your thoughts on any of the issues we're talking about today, whether it's the BBC and anti-Semitism, whether it is that interview with the former Israeli hostages you've just watched, whether it's the sport, whatever you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, Remember, you can use the main number to do three things. You can send me a voice note. Please keep it to less than a minute. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. And just to say that between now and 7, obviously I am here, and then between 7 and 9 in this studio, Kevin O'Sullivan will be with us. He will be presenting, and then What Just Happened between 9 and 10. And then at 10 o'clock, we're going to see and hear an interview that James Whale has done. James, of course, the legendary broadcaster suffering from cancer at the moment. He is terminally ill, and he's done what he calls his last interview. This is with Nigel Farage, his long-term friend, and Nigel Farage, of course, is the leader of Reform UK. Let's just see a little preview of the interview that will be broadcast at 10 o'clock tonight.
They won't have had the most delicious piece of sea bass I have ever had when I came to your places, and you cooked it for me.
Well, I'm a sea angler, have been all my life. Love all that. I mean, really, James, if I wasn't doing politics, I think I'd probably run a small holding. You know,
Yeah.
I keep ducks and geese, grow vegetables, go and catch a few fish, and just sort of go back to something very, very simple and very straightforward. But
I can remember it now.
yeah.
The sea bass was absolutely delicious.
Well, there you are.
Absolutely delicious.
I've now been tipped as a chef. How about?
All sorts of things. That is James Whale in discussion with Nigel Farage later on this evening, 10 o'clock this evening. You'll see that full interview. They discuss everything from food to politics to James's career and, of course, the outlook for him because he is terminally ill. James has been an amazing broadcaster. He has taught me an awful lot in the 4 years that I have been on the station, and even beyond that, earlier on when I was a young man watching and listening to his programmes, of course, as I was growing up. So he has been a great inspiration, a great man, and of course we wish him and his wife all the very, very best for what lies ahead. A really interesting story spotted by one of our viewers and listeners actually about a local businessman, a man called Peter McCormack, who's announced that he will personally fund private security patrols in Bedford town centre every Saturday in August, saying residents and businesses have been let down by Bedfordshire's police's failure to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. He is a club owner of Real Bedford Football Club. He's also a town centre entrepreneur who runs a couple of different businesses. And he's told the Bedford Independent he's launching the pilot scheme to make the town safer and more inviting, especially for women and children. He says, I love this town, but the police have utterly failed in their job to protect people here. We can all see crackheads, the alcoholics, the aggressive begging, the shoplifting. People feel unsafe when they're not coming into the town centre. If the police won't fix it, I will. That is Peter McCormack, who's a local businessman, talking about that change in Bedford. I wonder what you make of that. 0344 499 1000. Well, I want to speak to Colonel James Sunderland now. He is many things, of course, a very senior officer in the Army previously. He's also a former MP. He knows a lot about Veterans Affairs, of course, through both his roles. He chaired a committee about that and also an Armed Forces Bill Select Committee. James, good evening to you.
Hi, Peter.
I wonder what you make of this very, very serious data leak in regard to UK Special Forces, MI6 spies and military officers that have been named here. And I wonder what you make of the then Defence Secretary Ben Wallace's decision to injunct this, to do a legal mechanism which meant that we couldn't know about it. What do you make of this, James?
It conjures up images of a James Bond film, doesn't it? You think back to one of the recent Bond films where the baddie had that list of spies that was going to release it bit by bit to the media. I mean, I'm being a bit clear because it is a very serious issue, but quite seriously, I mean, 18,000 Afghans is bad enough. And these poor people were placed at risk in Afghanistan because they helped the British forces. But 100 or so British agents, senior army officers, special air service officers, the list goes on. I mean, they're clearly at risk, and one would hope that because the MOD knew about the leak, that they're taking measures now to mitigate the risks from that.
And do you think Ben Wallace did the right thing with the injunction?
It's a really tough call to make. I think with the benefit of hindsight, it's very easy to talk about, wow, 6,000 Afghans have come here, cost to the taxpayer. But in the chaos at the time, when Kabul fell, when the Afghan government fell, when people really were at risk, when there was a serious threat to life to these people. I do believe genuinely that the British government had a duty to these people, had a duty of care, responsibility. They paid a very high price to support us, and I think it was the right thing to do everything possible to get them out. Noting to date that 6,000 have come here, hopefully fully vetted, with a diligence already done, with another 12,000 perhaps on the list that haven't come.
Yeah, I think I'm probably seen as a bit of a traitor to my profession of journalist and thinking that Ben Wallace actually did do the right thing, but it's an interesting one, as you say, and no doubt this will continue to be a big issue as time goes on. Do you think it will now get the scrutiny, certainly quite plenty of scrutiny in the last few days, but do you think, you know, the further scrutiny that is nonetheless coming the way of the Ministry of Defence will get to the bottom of all of this?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. You've got something like this, which is pretty seismic, 2.5 year injunction, super injunction. It's inevitable that the Defence Select Committee, for example, might look at it. I dare say the leak's been investigated. I think they know who did it, when, perhaps even why. It was clearly an error of judgment. I mean, we've got systems in the MOD now that should theoretically prevent sensitive material from being emailed out. We've got the two systems, of course. We've got the light side and the dark side. We've got secret and restricted systems. So in theory, the protocols are there, whereby if you make that mistake, it's either deliberate or it's inadvertent to the point where you should be facing some kind of disciplinary action. But ultimately, I think there will be questions asked still. I think there will be perhaps a further inquiry, and we do need to make sure that lessons are learned, that it never happens again.
James, thank you for that. I just wonder what you make of the Freedom of Information request that shows that UK police have spent at least £27 million in the past year alone policing pro-Palestinian protests in this country.
It's a lot of money. I'm sure that the police have got better things to spend the money on. It's disappointing, the fact that whatever happens now globally, I think we've got such a diaspora in the UK now that people feel they have the right, and it's a good right to have, because it's freedoms that we have to go onto the streets and to protest. But it's a bit silly, because ultimately we know what's happening in the Middle East. It's very unsavoury, and you know, one feels huge empathy for all concerned. You know, people in Gaza have had a horrible time. Israel would argue, of course, that they've got a right to self-defence. I mean, we know about the atrocities a year ago, last October. Tensions are very charged at the moment, and people are feeling very sensitive about it, and protest is a good thing. But come on, you know, let's spend the money on where it's really needed.
Just speaking of police under pressure, I wonder what you make of this story in regard to the local businessman in Bedford announcing he's going to personally fund private security patrols in Bedford town centre every Saturday in August. He says the Bedfordshire police have failed to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. Just wonder what you think about that story.
Well, the guy clearly has lots of money. It's a very generous gesture, but disappointing that he feels it's needed. I mean, you go into any town centre now in the UK, and he's right. You can see the druggies, you can see the violence. A lot of it's alcohol-fueled. You can see people behaving in a very unpleasant way, and it's disappointing, because, I mean, this is not the society that I necessarily grew up in. I think we have seen a loss of standards over the years. I think we've allowed things to creep into, you know, legal behaviour, which previously was not legal. I think the police have got to do more. But of course, they're facing cuts, they're facing fiscal constraints. You know, we haven't got enough prison places. I think we do need to invest a lot more money in the police and in law and order, so that we can get the tolerance back in society and allow people to go out for the evening and not feel unsafe.
Perhaps we can have a chat about police taking no further action after the investigation into Kneecap's Glastonbury show. There was an incitement, as far as I could see, of a riot at a court case. I just wondered why you think Avon and Somerset Police have taken no further action. And of course, it's, what, 3 weeks, nearly 4 weeks on now since the Bob Villan comments, Pascal Robinson Foster saying death, death to the IDF. No arrest there either, by the look of things.
Well, one would hope that that the inaction to date is because they're investigating it. I mean, I wasn't there, and I don't follow this sort of thing very closely in terms of Glastonbury, but my understanding is that Kneecap, you know, they sort of towed the line this year. It was previous failings, perhaps, that we were concerned about, but certainly the nonsense with Bob Villan, whatever his name is, you know, incendiary, clearly divisive, clearly illegal. and one hopes that the police will take the appropriate action in that particular case.
Okay, James, thank you. That's Colonel James Sunderland there speaking to us. Thanks for your contribution this evening. I want to go to Sue in London, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Sue, you have some thoughts on migration. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Hi, Peter. Firstly, can I just say thank you so much for your unceasing support for the hostages and for the Jewish people in this country especially. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Sue. That's very kind. Thank
you. I heard that, firstly, and that interview was incredible, actually. Thank you again for that. What worries me now is, if you heard what they said, no Gazans are innocent. Okay, there must be some innocent Gazans, but they were all there. The Gazans, they're holding hostages, they're beating hostages, they're committing horrific crimes against these people in their homes. Now, France is opening their door to Gazans. Yeah. France is saying, come in, we'll take as many refugees as whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, we know how easy it is, Peter, how easy it is for them to get from, how easy these people get from France over to England. Yeah. Yeah. Just hop in a dinghy. You don't need your passport. Yeah. We are literally, because of France now opening their gates, opening their doors to Gazans, we are now the next
target.
We're in the front line. We are.
So I know exactly. Anyway. I know exactly what you mean. There are two things I'd say in regard to what you say. First of all, I agree with every word, and with the stuff you said at the start, I really appreciate that as well. Keith Siegel was moved 33 times as a hostage. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who knew about him, who knew what he looked like, who facilitated and helped that, and helped those people, whether they kept an eye on corners, whether they kept an eye on a movement of a car or whatever. Maybe they did it out of fear, but there are people who will support Hamas who aren't members of Hamas in Gaza. Now, there's some people who, of course, are trying to fight against them, but they have lots of support of people who are in Gaza. So you're right to make that point. In terms of refugees, asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them, coming to France, I mean, that is something that I'm very worried about as well. I'm worried about the threat of Islamism, the threat of people coming to this country. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they're from. They could well be from Gaza. They could well be Hamas members or supporters masquerading as refugees. We don't know their true history. And then if they make it to this country, this is the point. This is exactly, you're absolutely right to raise this, because we are a compassionate country, but we don't know who's coming in.
No, I'm very frightened now. I really am. And it sounds so... it sounds almost hysterical saying I'm very frightened. But
I think a lot of people are, though. I think a lot of people are.
But if they're letting Gazans in, and nobody knows which Gazans are members of Hamas or Fatah or any of these terrorist organisations, and the useful idiots here will open their arms wide and invite them in, and then let's see what happens, because it's going to be almost apocalyptic if they come to this country.
Well, Sue, I think you make an awful lot of very good points. We're right to be cautious about this. There need to be proper checks. Thank you for your remarks, Sarah, and thanks for your kind words as well at the start. The true heroes and the people who really must be remembered are Aviva and Keith, and of course the 50 people who are still being held hostage. We think about 20 of them are alive. We think about them. We talk about them. They've been there for an awfully long time, something like 652 days. Thank you to Michael in Norfolk, who says, I feel this country of ours is under a dark cloud. It's getting bigger and darker. Leslie says, who denigrates the UK? Starmer does. Twice he has stood with two foreign leaders who both criticised our democratic vote to leave the EU, and Starmer said nothing. Sarah in London says, sending the girl home from school in a Union flag dress is even more disgusting when you consider what that taught the rest of the children in that school. British equals bad. Go home and hide yourself. Those people are teaching our kids the future of this country. Mick says, now that school students can vote and that young girl was sent home for a Union Jack dress, it's time to record what teachers are teaching kids to protect kids and staff. In the interest of child safety, I think it's essential that parents provide body cams for their kids to wear in school, says Mick. Mick, we're not there yet, are we? I really hope we never get there. I really hope we don't. That would just be a very, very sad day, I think. Tim is a UK veteran and says, Peter, there are a lot of UK veterans wondering why we bothered giving up our careers, giving up our lives to see it the way it is, giving up our lives to see it the way it is today, says Tim. Lots to discuss. We're going to have Yak with Yaki. In just a minute, Michael Yaki is a US political analyst, former senior advisor to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, who was, of course, the Speaker of the House. And there's lots going on about Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, what Trump knew, whether he sent them. The Wall Street Journal, which is, of course, owned by the same company as Talk, reporting that Trump's name appeared on a bawdy 2003 personal note to Epstein, the president calling it fake. We'll get the full details from Michael Yaki in just a second here on Talk.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about an extraordinary story in the United States. It's involving Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, died some say by suicide, some say there are questions to answer about that in prison. He was a sex offender. Donald Trump says he has now asked the Justice Department to release court documents relating to Jeffrey Epstein. This is something that Trump and many around him have talked about for some time. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, said we are ready to move the court today, Friday, today obviously, to unseal the grand jury transcripts, but it could take some time for documents to be released. Donald Trump, the president, spoke about the Epstein files yesterday.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled? Why do you think that is?
Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think, well, really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, let them have it.
President of the United States, Donald Trump there. Well, there's been a very interesting Wall Street Journal article, should say for reasons of complete transparency that the Wall Street Journal is owned by the same company that Talk is owned by, and it reports that Trump's name appeared on a bawdy 2003 personal note to Epstein. The president has called that fake. Let's hear from Michael Yaki. He is a US political analyst and former senior advisor to the Speaker, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. Michael, great to have you back on today. Always good to have a yak with Yaki. Tell us a little bit about this story, where it has come from and where it goes now, do you think?
Well, it's a day that ends with Y, so it's always going to be a good story day in the United States. Look, what I think is fascinating, I think, to people outside the United States is really, what is the fascination about Jeffrey Epstein? And the fact is that, and I think the British Navy may have invented this phrase. This is kind of an example where the president is being hoisted on his own petard, because he actually made this a big issue in his campaign in 2016, and even referenced in 2020. The idea is that, not the idea. This is sort of the bare supposition that there is a deep state elite comprised mainly of liberal Democrats who are engaged in child predation, and that it's been covered up by the deep state. Jeffrey Epstein, because of his predilection for young women, the fact that he hung out with people like Bill Clinton, it became this sort of not even say conspiracy, just amazing story that was woven by right-wing commentators who supported Donald Trump by and large. It was even amplified by Donald Trump during the 2016-2020 campaign. There was this conspiracy called Pizzagate, which people may or may not remember, which involved a pizza parlor outside of the U.S. Capitol that was apparently a den for Democrats to huddle and engage in. And
that was proven to be completely fake.
Yeah, and of course, there was even a Law and Order SVU episode about that in terms of making fun of it. But yeah, this has been part and parcel of the MAGA base, because for them it's an affirmation that there's a deep state conspiracy centered around child predation, performed by liberal elites. Jeffrey Epstein was in the middle of it, and throughout the campaign, Donald Trump was promising that he was going to get to the bottom of it. He was going to release all the information to it. And then his attorney general and his FBI director, who was actually one of the biggest proponents for the conspiracy theory around Jeffrey Epstein and a client list of child predators who were liberal Democratic elites, came out a few days ago and said, there's nothing there. And for the conspiracy theorists, that exactly proves that there is something there, because now the Attorney General and the FBI Director, who had previously been supportive of it, are all of a sudden not. And it just transforms into this big blossoming story covered by all the media in the United States. And more importantly, just is something that is like a dog with a bone. The deep MAGA supporters of Trump. They're not large, but they are critical.
The problem as well in regard to Trump himself is that demonstrably he was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's.
Yes, he was a pal. There's a lot of photographic evidence and documentation of them going around, and he says, well, we had a falling out over real estate. No one can prove that because the person who could talk about it is dead, and therefore I didn't know anything about it. But he has been on record saying, we like women, we like to go out together, these kinds of things. And but he's never been a target of MAGA because he successfully distanced himself from it by amplifying it as a Democratic conspiracy. And now, because of this alleged letter for Jeffrey Epstein on his birthday, it's become a thing. And now he's trying to figure out a way to get away from it, and the way he's doing it is sort of contrary to everything that he said. So I would expect at some point they're going to court. They're saying they're going to release evidence. You notice that he said on the tarmac he was only talking about credible evidence. So however you define credible means that, again, will be seized upon by the MAGA folks who are saying, well, they're just trying to define what credible is, and we're never going to get anywhere near this.
The Wall Street Journal report has been called fake news by Donald Trump. Does any of this matter to him? Do you think, obviously, this is going to continue and various people are going to never really believe that the full truth has been put out in public? But for Donald Trump, is this something that is just going to continue, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be a kind of cancer that eats away at his MAGA base, because they're not going to give up on this. I assume at some point he may decide to put someone on the sacrificial altar for this. It could be Pam Bondi, it could be Kash Patel, someone who will say they didn't do enough, they didn't do what I told them to do. We're going to continue to get at the bottom of this and try and push this off to another day until another story comes along on a day that ends with Y. That'll push this off the front page. But here we are. He gets somewhat of a slow news week. He hasn't gone after Putin this week. Nothing happened with Netanyahu, and again, I think for the media and for a lot of onlookers, the fact that he had been so adamant about making this a big deal during his 2016 campaign and bringing in people who said, we're going to get to the bottom of this and release all the information, and then all of a sudden saying there's nothing there, it's not credible, I don't know what you're talking about, it's silly, just further feeds a conspiracy that's now going to be looking at him, which is exactly what he does not want to see happen, especially to his, until now, fanatically loyal base.
Michael, great to talk to you. Really interesting, and thanks for illuminating that issue. It's Michael Yaki there, who is a US political analyst, former senior advisor to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. In a second, we're going to get the latest about what's in the Sun tomorrow. Paul Ince, of course, being hit with a road ban for drink driving. We will talk about that. We'll talk about Basic Instinct getting an anti-woke reboot. Yes, very interesting that it's getting a reboot. Will that iconic scene still be in there? And Queen Camilla having a birthday outing with her grandkids to a posh ice cream shop, leaving with £2,000 worth of stock. £2,000 at an ice cream shop. Lots to discuss with John Lucas, who'll be with us here in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks everybody who's been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in just a second. But first of all, we'll speak to John Lucas, who is, of course, the night news editor of The Sun. John, great to see you.
Hello.
Lots to discuss, including this story we've been covering today about the police chief blasting selfish criminality and violence. This is the Bell Hotel in Epping. Of course, there were many peaceful protesters, but some who went over the line.
Absolutely. Well, it's like this is what we don't want to see. You know, it reminds us of what happened last year in the wake of the Southport attacks, and obviously this sort of trouble is not acceptable. However, it's an issue that is likely to come up because of the controversy around these hotels. It's the story. You know, one night I'll come on here and we won't talk about migrants because the story will be done and dusted. But we're pursuing it every day. Yesterday we had this big investigation that we had into the crimes that are being committed by people in these migrant hotels. So it was about 350, I think, in the first 6 months of the year. All sorts of offences. Crucially, one of these cases, one of the sort of high-profile ones, was allegedly committed by someone at this hotel, which is why it's drawn all of this attention on it. So, yeah, obviously the Essex Police very upset about this, and they're warning, don't come back at the weekend and and cause more trouble. Has to be said, you know, there was a protest there was a counter-protest, and that obviously always causes tension, but you see people jumping up and down on police vans. What's the point of that?
Yeah.
Doesn't achieve anything. It certainly doesn't help help tensions, but that's one strand of our coverage tomorrow. A second strand is we've been back in court monitoring these cases. We actually, a small victory, I have to say. We had this big investigation into the Deliveroo riders, and we actually had one charged with working illegally. Not very many have been. This is the first one actually charged, set to appear in court for doing this, but he failed to actually deliver himself to court. Didn't turn up, so there's a warrant out for this chap's arrest. I won't name him, but we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully next week he'll be up in court. Third strand is from our political editor Jack Elsom, who is writing about the fact that Home Office ministers actually can't tell us how many migrants we're not deporting because of human rights laws. So these are challenges from the lawyers. So the government have come out and said, oh, it's great, we've been able to move 4,500 since Labour came into power.
That's a very small number.
And we said, yeah, but how many have you not been able to deport? And they said, well, actually, we haven't got the figures on that.
Yeah, they do have the figures, they're just not telling you. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're going to keep on top of this issue and looking at the hotels. But it is sad, we don't want to see riots at hotels. But, I mean, I heard it described this morning as a sort of moral panic and people getting wound up over nothing. We are very diligently looking at the facts. It's in black and white, very dispassionate. And you know, everything that's going in the paper is true. That they are the numbers, and we're there. It's not just a paper job. We're there in court, watching,
of course,
what's happening.
seeing what's going on, and that's what the Sun can do because you have the resources to do it, which is great. I mean, one story we've been discussing on this programme is a local businessman in Bedford who has announced he's going to personally fund private security patrols in Bedford town centre every Saturday in August. He says residents and businesses have been let down by Bedfordshire's police failure to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour, and that's to do with migration, that's to do with other people who are indigenous to the population. A pilot scheme being launched to make the town safer and more inviting, especially for women and children. People are feeling this. We get calls and texts and messages about it every single day. This is a real thing, and you're doing good work to look into that and get to the bottom of it, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, look, it worries people, and you know, does the government really have a full understanding of exactly what's
any
what's
handle
going
on
on
it whatsoever?
Yeah.
Let's speak about Incy Wincy driver. Great headline. The former England captain Paul Ince hit with a road ban for drink driving.
Yeah, it's been a bad old week for celebs. So we've had Emma Watson was in court. She got a driving ban. Zoe Wanamaker got a driving ban. And I mean, they were for speeding. This is a bit more serious. Paul Ince. So he was in. I'm not a golfer, but they call it the 19th hole, don't they?
Yes.
In the bar after a round of golf. I think he'd been at a charity day This is at Heswell Golf Course in Cheshire. It's a few weeks ago. He'd been at Charity Day, and he says he hadn't had any dinner. He'd had a couple of drinks, but he was spotted in his black Range Rover, sort of swerving across the road. I think he's hit a sort of mini roundabout, blown out a couple of tyres, and this was all witnessed, unfortunately for him, by an off-duty police officer who was sort of first on the scene. And Ince was hauled up to court today, so he's got a ban. It's a 12-month ban at Chester Magistrates Court. He's had to pay just over £7,000. Yeah. It's quite hefty, but
he can afford it, I think.
He can afford it.
One taxi home from that golf club might have been a lot cheaper than what has happened there.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Basic Instinct. This is an interesting one. It's getting an anti-woke reboot.
Yeah.
Who will be wielding the ice pick this time, do you think?
I'm going to say this is one of the stories that really got our Sun News Desk talking this morning. Anti-woke reboot of Basic Instinct. So the idea is that this is going to be it's not a sequel. They're rebooting the storyline, which we all sort of know the major points of it. Very sexy lady, and she's a murderer. I don't want to, no spoilers.
Don't want to give it away, but she's a crime writer who then turns out to be a murderer.
That's it. Yes. So, but the front runners to star in this are Margot Robbie and Sydney Sweeney. Absolutely two very beautiful, incredibly talented actresses, and we know Sydney Sweeney is sort of a bit anti-woke. She's a big favourite in our newsroom for that reason. And interestingly, it's going to be written by the same guy who wrote the original. So this is Joe Esterhaas. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So he wrote the original in 1992, and he's 80 now.
Right.
But he says, I'm still going to write this, and goes. So he says, to those who question why an 80-year-old man is writing this sexy, erotic thriller. I won't go into all of it, but he says, I call my writing partner the twisted little man, and he lives deep inside me.
Okay.
And I'm going to provide viewers with a wild and orgasmic ride, and that makes me very happy. And I think lots of people will be very happy.
Well,
with this
I wonder if the the most inappropriate thing about the smoking scene will be, of course, the fact someone had a cigarette. What are you going to do? Charge me with smoking? May well be the most controversial bit, and not what actually happens in the seconds after that. Right then, let's move on to more appropriate matters for 20 to 7 in the evening. Queen Camilla, her birthday outing with her grandkids to a posh ice cream shop. This ice cream shop sells unusual ice cream flavours, including Bisto gravy and Iron Brew ice cream.
Yeah, I wish I'd have had the job of going down here. We sent reporters down there today. So this is at, it's called the Ice Cream Project, and it's at Anya Hindmarch, fancy handbag retailer, not somewhere that I've ever had the opportunity to go to.
You buy your fancy handbags elsewhere, John.
Exactly, absolutely. Yeah. And so the Queen was there with her with Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopez, that's her son and daughter-in-law, and 5 grandkids. And they spent an absolute fortune in this place. So what you can do is a £45 a head tester, and you get 15 ice creams, but you don't know what they are.
Right.
And then you eat them and you have to guess what they are. And they're all mad flavours based on big brands. So you get, you can get chocolate hobnobs, Ovaltine, extra virgin olive oil.
Oh my word.
Flying Goose Sriracha, Bird's Custard, Bisto Gravy. It's very bizarre.
What flavour do you think should be made into an ice cream?
Oh.
I had Turkish Delight ice cream once, and it was amazing. It had like real bits of Turkish Delight in it. I just thought that was incredible. I thought it was a really, really good idea.
Yeah,
for an
that's
ice cream.
good. Well, they do Twiglets, which I'm partial to. A Twiglet.
Are you a Twiglet fan?
I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I wouldn't mind trying it. And we had our reporter Zara Qureshi was down there. She tried the Bisto gravy. So we got a little taste test. Very good. Bisto gravy, a weird one, but not totally off-putting. And she tried the Garner's pickled onion flavour.
Wow.
Which she said the smell hits you before the taste, with unexpected onion bits that take you by surprise. Nobody wants unexpected onion bits
to take you by surprise. No, I think that's probably not what you want.
Yeah.
Well, that all sounds fascinating. It's all in the Sun tomorrow. John, thank you very much indeed. That's John Lucas there, who is the night news editor of the Sun. And I can tell you right now that the businessman, this was literally just someone flagged this to us about the businessman in Bedford Town Centre who is going to get residents and businesses to be protected by private security. He's going to personally fund private security, and he's agreed to speak to us after the break. So unplanned, but the things I love about these shows is that the running order is never the same at 4 o'clock as it is at 7 o'clock. Peter McCormack from Bedford is going to tell us why he's doing this. Stay with us here on Talk.
But if we are able to expand that scheme so that we can send everyone who comes over back, then it won't be worth their trying to come across. And therefore, there will be no return.
No, but it's not. But that's not the deal. The deal is not let's send them all back and we don't get anything in return. The deal is if we send 50 back, we get 50 coming the other way.
Yes, the deal is a pilot scheme.
How is that? Well, no, it's a pilot scheme. 2, you've said if quite a few times. 3, it's going to cost us a lot more money.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it was Ryan, our producer, who spotted this story about the businessman to pilot private security for Bedford Town Centre. It's been called a political stunt. What do you think about what Peter McCormack is doing? He's announced he'll personally fund private security patrols in Bedford Town Centre every Saturday in August. Well, on a Talk exclusive, Peter joins us now. Peter McCormack, you're very welcome to Talk. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Why have you decided to do this?
Yeah, so I own a couple of businesses in the town centre, and I've become witness to the evidential decline of the town centre. We have, like a lot of towns up and down the country, we have a problem with addiction in the town. People buying, selling, taking drugs. We have a problem with alcoholism in the town. We also have a problem of shoplifting, which is downstream from those addiction issues, and we've also got an issue whereby we have this growth in HMOs in the town, which are being used to house people in temporary accommodation. And when you combine these with an already difficult economic situation, less people are coming into the town. Women feel unsafe coming into town with their children. Other people just think it's become a bit of a dump. And I'm from Bedford. I've lived here my whole life, so I'd like to see it turn around. And I've always felt the first thing you need to do is deal with the security. Unfortunately, the police are very stretched. They do the best they can, but they're very stretched either because budgets have been cut and there's not enough police officers.
Well, actually, the Police and Crime Commissioner, John Tizard, says your scheme is a political stunt. He said at a time when antisocial behaviour is at a long-term low in Bedford Town Centre and the collaborative Bedfordshire Police and Borough Council Safer Streets, Safer Town Centre campaign is underway, this looks like a political stunt. Keeping our town centres safe is the responsibility of publicly accountable police and local authorities, not private individuals. Let's support the police and council, and in so doing support our local residents and businesses. What would you say to John Tizard?
I think he's probably embarrassed. He's embarrassed that I've had to do this. Calling it a political stunt is a bit strange because I'm not a politician. And calling it a stunt is an insult. It's a necessity. I'm in the town centre operating 2 businesses there. I speak to residents, I speak to other shop owners and understand the problems they're dealing with. And if you spend time in the town centre or around Bedford getting to know people, you will find out very quickly that people don't want to come into the town if they go to the multi-storey car park. There are people using the drugs or aggressively begging in the stairwells, and that's not a place a mother's going to come with 2 young children. And so,
there are 5.
I think he's embarrassed.
There are 5 Saturdays in August, then, and each of those 5 Saturdays you're going to provide private security. How many people will be sort of on the beat? Essentially, what powers do they actually have, and how much is it all going to cost, John?
Peter.
Peter. Apologies.
It's fine. So it'll be 10 security guards from a company I know who provides security for my club, because I own a club in the town. And they only have the powers as citizens, which is if somebody sees an indictable offence being committed, you do have the power as a citizen to arrest them. You do have the power to stop them. But really, I think it's more to provide reassurance for people in the town. We've had a growth in assaults on women in Bedford, and that is a problem, dozens over the last month. And I want people to realise, look, if they come to the car park, as we will provide security at every entrance, they won't be hassled or harassed by people on drugs in the stairwells as they're trying to get into the town. And they will be available to go up and down the street to just keep an eye on businesses and hopefully provide some kind of reassurance. We're certainly not going to get in the situation where the security guards are doing the job of the police. That's the job of the police. But I expect to engage with the police and them help to support this. But this is the job of private security guards, and they will only do what's within the powers that they have as a private security guard or as a citizen.
And how much money are you going to spend on it, Peter?
So this is costing about £10,000 for the month. If it's a success, I'm happy to increase the spend and carry it on for the whole year. But it's also a bit of a chess move in that I want the town to improve. I would like people to come back to the town, spend money in the shops. I would like the types of shops to improve. So hopefully this sparks a civic response, which would see other locals who want to help support the town and help reshape it. Because, I mean, you don't have to look very far in the country at the moment to realise, like, up and down the country, town centres are dying and have got a range of antisocial issues.
Well, do you think others are going to follow your example? We do know that there are many collective funds, different housing developments and things like that, where people put money into a fund where there's private security there and so on. I haven't heard about it in regard to a town and a local business person doing this, but do you think others will draw inspiration from what you're doing, Peter?
I mean, it is already happening. It is happening in other towns in the country. That's where I got inspired by when I was kind of researching it and looking into what is this a problem elsewhere. I'm sorry, but I've forgotten the town, but there was one specific town where somebody was stabbed outside a charity shop, and the town decided to implement a private security program. Unfortunately, if the police are unfunded or not funded to the level to be able to provide this, I think you're going to see an increase in this private security.
And what do you think I think you're right, Peter. What do you think it says about where we are as a society, that is taking people who have means, like you, successful businessmen, who's actually saying, well, for the good of the town that you live in and have lived in your entire life, that you actually need to put your own money, profits into to actually secure it, when it is a reasonable assumption for any citizen to say that the police will keep the streets safe?
I think it just proves that we've had 2 to 3 decades of being ruled by morons in government. Successive governments have failed to make the right decisions, both on fiscal and monetary policy. and led us to the point where we are as a nation broke and constantly looking where we can cut funding, whether that's schooling, whether that's policing, and we are being squeezed as a country off the back of what is essentially socialism. And I think it also proves another point, that the free market itself works. All I'm doing is a free market response to a security issue in the town, and that I'm providing it and hoping that that will increase the footfall into the town and start an economic rebirth of Bedford.
And what about the council and locals? What sort of reaction have you had to this announcement?
Yeah, quite mixed actually. Some people very positive have got in touch and said, this is amazing, thank you, how can I support? And other people referring it to a vigilante force, which I don't consider it is a vigilante. I want it to be seen as a positive step, in that if you go to a supermarket these days, you'll often see security. If you go to a concert, you'll see security. When you go to bed at night, you lock your door. Security is just a part of life, and we just don't have enough of it in our town centre. So I would like to see more of a positive, but unfortunately, and it is a political point, in that many on the left do not like this idea. The people I've seen commenting where it's been posted on Facebook, and very clearly,
God forbid the private sector provide any form of solution to anything.
I mean, it's just the sad state of things there are. But look, I'm a businessman. I'm a citizen of Bedford. I was born here. I love the town. I want it to be successful. There is a gap in the market that isn't being provided, and I am entering that free market to provide it. Hopefully, I won't have to do it for long. Hopefully, the police come back and sort it out. But unfortunately, our PCC, John Tizard, is a particularly weak character who has not provided this. So if he won't, then I will.
Peter, what I'd love to do is talk to you after the first Saturday night. Would you come on again in a few weeks after the first Saturday night and let me know how it's gone? The first Saturday night, I think, is the 2nd of August. So we'll maybe get you back on the 4th or 5th of August. It would be lovely to chat to you again. I wish you all the best with it. That is Peter McCormack there, a businessman in Bedford, and we will ask Bedford Council for a statement on that. I should say that the local Police and Crime Commissioner says that it's a political stunt. It says at a time when antisocial behaviour is a long-term low in Bedford Town Centre, and the collaborative Bedfordshire Police and Borough Council Safer Streets, Safer Town Centre campaign is underway. This looks like a political stunt, says the Police and Crime Commissioner John Tizard. Well, why would Peter McCormack be doing it if he didn't feel he needed to, would be my question. Honestly, you know, as Peter says, he's not a politician. Lots to discuss within that. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Kevin O'Sullivan in a second, but I want to take a call from George in Wimbledon first about the Middle East. George, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, lovely to talk to you again. It's a funny one because I've lived in the Middle East for over a decade. I'm back in London now. I'm married to a Lebanese guy. He's Christian, and we've got a flat in Beirut, and so I know the country really well. I know the region really well. I've been to the West Bank many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and I used to have an issue with Israel in the sense of the politics and the settlements and all the rest of it. But what I've learned over the years, and particularly since 7th of October, is that one country is surrounded by people who despise it, and it is anti-Semitic. It is about Jews as well as the country. Now, I just got back from Lebanon this week after a month, and you know, the Israelis, in my mind, have done Lebanon a massive favour by getting rid of Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, and his successor. I'm delighted to say, and all of my friends, including my husband, who's a Christian, are so happy that Israel has done this. But you know what, Peter? They hate Israel even more. And that's what I find astonishing. And
interesting.
And because of
it's just so ingrained, isn't it? Yeah.
I think the hatred of the Jews and the hatred of Israel is so deeply ingrained that, and I said this to my husband the other day, I said, you know what? Israel could cure cancer and you still hate them.
Yeah. It's true, and there are, you know, Israeli scientists. I had one of them on this programme who's basically doing moves in that direction, actually, in regard to new technology. And I just wonder if these people who would boycott and divest themselves of all Israel does would do that. And there is just a really almost irrational hatred. It's interesting, George. I mean, I've been to the West Bank. I've been to the border with Gaza, for example, and it's a really I mean, the Middle East is a fascinating place, and I feel I only know about 1% of what I want to know. But I do think there is a choice that needs to be made, and that is between you know, a liberal democracy that would celebrate your union with your husband, for example, and other countries that do not, and other countries that would actually harm you and your husband for being in that relationship.
That's what I find astonishing. You know, this whole Queers for Palestine thing. It's you know, it's the only country in the entire region, and I've lived in the UAE, which tolerates us. It turns a blind eye. But you know, Israel's the only country where I'm not illegal, where I'm given full rights under the law. And by the way, Arabs are given full rights there. People talk about it being an apartheid state. I used to think that, but it's actually not. I've done my reading. They're represented in Parliament. They have equal access to public services and all the rest of it. And so I just think after the 7th of October and the just vile things that Hamas did, it's really made me realise those poor people are surrounded by, frankly, monsters. And my husband's not a monster.
No, of course not. Of course not. He just has different views to you. Well, I wish you well in persuading him of your point of view, and thank you for your call. It was really interesting to hear it, and I agree with so much of it, so thank you. Christina was talking about Peter McCormack a little bit earlier on. Christina says, well done, that man, someone who cares about his hometown. That's Peter McCormack in Bedford. We'll talk to him in a few weeks' time when we see exactly what has happened. We need more like him, says Christina. And Betty says, fair play to Peter McCormack, but a lot of the shops and bus stations attract problems. I had the misfortune to spend a few nights in Bedford midweek during and after COVID, and even back then it was a lovely old town, ruined and littered with sick and homeless, addicts, hotels full of people. Even the first and second generation